I talked to the organization, and they confirmed that they weren't going to do any further intervention. And I got off the phone knowing that the likelihood that this child was going to pass away was highly likely. And Kerry said, "You've been dreaming about it. You've been talking about it. You know what to do." I got online, and we were incorporated as a nonprofit in the state of Indiana within 24 hours.
Hello, this is Jimbo from the YouTube channel Jimbo, South Dakota, and this is the Hog House Chronicles podcast. And I'm here in Fort Wayne, Indiana right now with some very good friends. We visited here many times, Kerry and Rebecca Ghent. And Kerry and I, we met through the military, and this is wife Rebecca, and they have a lot going on in their personal lives. Kerry is now retired as well. And we're going to get the story of what they have going in their personal lives, which is quite a bit. And then Rebecca, based on that, has to leave early. So we're going to start with that story first and then get into the military portion of this. So thanks for having us. Thanks for feeding us, putting up with us.
More than welcome, Jimbo.
We were on our way to New York and back. We stopped here twice and greatly appreciate it. But Rebecca, why don't you go ahead and just, you can start from the beginning and just how it came to be on what you're doing, and then explain what it is you are doing.
All right. Well, I guess about 14 years ago, Kerry and I had the opportunity to host a child that needed some medical care here in the U.S. This child was, these children were from West Africa. And the first couple go-arounds, we weren't very successful at actually getting the child here. Our family, our kids were young, and we were anticipating these kids coming in and staying with us, and we would care for them while they got their medical care. And then ultimately there would be reunification. And the first children we were paired with, one had passed away prior to getting here, and the other got tied up on visa complications. So I think there was a pretty good... There was a lot of doubt of whether or not we should continue this. It was, hurtful. You get excited about having a child and the prospect of bringing someone into your family and getting the kids involved, and it didn't happen. But then very last minute, I got a phone call, and they had asked again, and, I was doubtful. And she said, "No, actually, this child is on the airplane and will be here tomorrow." And so I had a quick conversation with Kerry, and I think it was decided that I was going to quit my job and we were going to bring this child in. And I hung up my nursing hat, my official nursing hat, and brought our first child. His name was Useni, and he was a cleft lip and palate baby, and he was 21 days old, and I don't even think he weighed 4 pounds at the time when he had come. And that was our first go round with this medical hosting program. So.
Wow. So then there was a sponsor that brought him to you here.
Yeah, we worked with another organization, and we did that for about 1.5 years. And, being a nurse, I had my own ideas of how an organization, with that was doing such work should happen. And it wasn't quite aligning with how I would do things as a nurse. And, we learned a lot, and I think there was always that, well, if I ever did it, and, Kerry was always supportive, but he jokingly called it my hobby for many years. And it came down to a point that one of the children that we had hosted had gone back prematurely with this organization, and it was kind of against doctors' wishes. And she was back in her country for not even 10 days, and her health was failing. And somehow the liaison had gotten a hold of me, which was kind of taboo. host families and liaisons don't really communicate. And but he got a hold of me, told me what was going on. I talked to the organization, and they confirmed that they weren't going to do any further intervention. And I got off the phone knowing that the likelihood that this child was going to pass away was highly likely. And Kerry said, "You've been dreaming about it. You've been talking about it. You know what to do." I got online, and we were incorporated as a nonprofit in the state of Indiana within 24 hours. And within the next 24 hours, we had already applied for a visa and had started facilitating bringing this child back to the U.S. for our very first, Ray of Hope child. We had to come up with a name very quickly, and we had decided on the name Ray of Hope. And so it was Ray of Hope Medical Missions. So we brought this child to the U.S. to get medical care up at University of Michigan. We had no idea if it was going to be one child or if it was going to be a zillion children. We just knew at the time this one child needed our help. And as we were dealing with this one child in the hospital, we had started getting referrals. And within, I think the first 6 months, we had 22 kids in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not all with us. Mm-mm. The organization had.
Right.
Correct.
And not only is it the physical deformities, medical issues, but if they didn't get this kind of help, it would be even more rough for them in their own country. Is that true?
The likelihood they would be sacrificed or executed.
Oh, my word.
It is deeply believed that these children bring on plague and famine and are curses to the villages.
A lot of superstition, a lot of beliefs that just aren't. A belief that explains in a simple way some of the birth defects that are at least normal birth defects. They're not abnormal in that sense, but they believe it's some sort of curse, and they would kill these children. And that just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, and not necessarily the immediate family, the moms and dads. There's this evidence of love for this child, but they are so community driven, and all of a family's decision has such a heavy impact on the community that it's under the community pressure, and it's usually led by the local leaders. A lot of the areas we worked with are believers in witchcraft and very indigenous, cultural beliefs, and they don't align with the Western culture. And so in some weird way, you have to respect it, but combat it at the same time.
Right, because you're in their country.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not going to do any good if you go there and just tell them that they're wrong, they you have to get a rapport with them that they don't believe that you're judging them and that, you're thinking ill will of them because they think differently. Obviously it's something, down deep in my bones that I don't believe that a child should be sacrificed, and I don't believe a child brings a curse or a famine onto a village, but, we're battling, centuries of that belief, decades, and it's taught. And, all we can do is to give them an example, let them live by example. And the children that have gone back have done exactly that. They hear these children that they would have written off as cursed children or, non-viable children. And, some of them are 12, 13 years old now, and
right.
They're back with their families and, at top of their class, and, definitely have this great potential to be even leaders. Extremely
rewarding, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's cool to see this child that you held in your arms, knowing that, was considered to be, not viable to life, to not only viable, but important, and so.
Have any of the locals voiced any of that to you, or is it just so tight that, you don't get reaffirmed by the locals.
Oh, no, I definitely think that we have seen, that the locals, especially where we're at in Uganda now, I think we've seen huge changes in acceptance. And you definitely see a shift towards acceptance and inclusion rather than, it's their worldly beliefs are changing, and that's not always good. But in this case, I think it's really, really good. I think it's really
Yeah,
good.
definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so then, some of the children have come here and back and come back. So some have had like 2 or 3 different sessions with the doctors here in the U.S.
Yeah. Quite a few of them have were not one and doners, that they came and then there was a intermittence of treatment, and so they were able to go back and reunite with their families, and that reunification and to rebuild that relationship, and then to come back for additional surgeries.
Because it's not just cosmetic. They're fixing everything that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, so especially with our cleft lip and palates, there's organizations out there that they do tremendous work because they take care of the immediate, the aesthetics of a lip, which obviously is what's going to set, a child immediately when they see that physical deformity. But there's a lot more that goes on too, especially midline deficiencies, which essentially a cleft is, that they can have kidney problems, they can have heart issues, the palate is wide open. So unlike some of the organizations that are in country and just closing that lip to get rid of that social stigma, our team did definitely 2, sometimes 3 or 4 surgeries to make sure that their speech was being developed, that they didn't have issues with breathing, that they were eating okay. And that was inclusive of making sure that that palate was closed and functioning.
Mm-hmm. And so then you've had the beginning was the 22 children here and back, and then that started progressing how?
Yeah, so at one point we had 22 in the country at once, and so it was so busy. And that started, our first came in 2012, and by 2019, right before COVID hit, we had treated and reunited 63 kids.
It's a lot of kids.
Nice. That is a lot.
Yeah.
No doubt.
It's a lot of families. It's a lot of families that, they were given hope, where, I always equate being a mom myself, that the happiest day of my life was that day my child was born. And I just can't imagine that the majority of these moms, that the birth of their child was actually one of the worst days of their lives.
Right.
That they were hopeless. They, weren't given, they weren't even, at least here we're optimistic and we're, immediately given treatment and options. And we've got medical staff that are willing to get you and, through that. I mean, all the way from social services all the way to surgical teams. And there's just so much support. And with these moms, not only did they not have medical support, but they didn't have community support. And they were, I can only imagine, embarrassed and scared. And so I've always said that reunification day, the day that we put that child fixed and back in the mom's arms, is that day of birth. That exuberance that they should have experienced the day the baby was born. They get that when we put babies back in, or even young children back in their mom's arms.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's that connecting, that the medical advancements that we have in our country, the hope that we have with them in the developing world, but then doing it in the name of Jesus. That there's a lot of great people doing great things to help other humans, to counter the horrible things that humans can do to each other. But one of the things that was primal to our motivation was to do it in the name of Jesus. And we've never made it a pre-qualification. We've never been pushy about it. But when someone asks, because it's not easy emotionally, it's not easily financially, but people will ask, why do you do this? They'll ask our host families, why do you go through the anguish? Because you have to say goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
Goodbye day, and all the emotions wrapped up in goodbye day. And that's when the host families say goodbye to the child, and we send them back to their home country and their family. It's a pretty traumatic experience. We've gone through it as a family. We've gone through it as an organization, and it's tough. But you look at it, and if you're doing it for some greater cause, and for us as believers and in a God that's bigger than we are, to serve him in such a way gives us that why, gives us that motivation to endure the hardships, the suffering, because it's not easy. It's not how we were designed. We're not designed to raise other people's children. And that abnormality or anomaly is evident when you have to send these kids back, and it just breaks your heart because some of them you never hear from again.
Mm-hmm.
We've hosted a child. We had them for 18 months, from an infant to 18 months. And if you can imagine as a parent, all the milestones you go through, and you really get attached. And then people will ask, how do you say goodbye? And you just cry. It breaks your heart.
I was going to ask, is there much communication between host families at all? I mean, is it like totally gone, or do they have some capabilities of?
We really, as an organization, try to limit it. There's a lot of pitfalls we've experienced as an organization when our human emotions sometimes cloud the bigger picture. And when you're from the West, we, generally speaking, look on the developing world as they're not where we're at. We're above, we're better, we're more advanced. And sometimes that can cloud our view of what's best for the child and what's best for their culture. And that, when we allowed the host families to connect with the bio families, I think it always caused problems.
I could see that. It's better just to help and then let them go.
And that's the tough side of it. That's the part that got, or even is, the difficult part of this model, is managing the situation of, having kids here that and you love them. That's part of a prerequisite to wanting the children, is to love them. But then you got to set them go. You have to set them free and let them go back to their culture. And that's where it gets messy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we wanted to do differently than we were a host family for another organization is, once they're back, we do want to ensure that we're doing the very best we can for that family. And that's where the host family did have the opportunity to sponsor education, to maybe subsidize the repairing of a home or getting some occupational training. And predominantly, we worked out of West Africa. We were working out of countries, Cote d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast, Burkina Faso. These are countries on the western edge of Africa, the continent. And it's a harsh life, that they scrape out in existence. And from the West, we look at it, but that's the majority world. That the most of the world lives that way. We are the exception. And it gave us the opportunity to show the love of Jesus to others. And we were able to bring the children here, experience them, and get them back to their culture. And then there were situations that our in-country liaison was able to facilitate additional development, where we were participate in occupational training and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, anytime you're doing anything, it costs money. So how was the financing working? Only mention as much as you want, or What can you tell us about the financing, or how it got to where you started developing the campus that you have? And you can explain that.
So the first couple years, I mean, obviously, going to people and saying, "Hey, would you donate to this very unknown, very small, nonprofit that I started?" Wasn't really realistic, and it was hard. And so I was able to take my connections in the medical field and my love for cooking, and I actually catered lunch and learns for a lot of the medical professionals, farm reps, anytime that medical offices or anything needed a lunch or something supplied, I would cater for them. And that's how, for the first 2 years, that's literally how we funded these children to come over, which was about $7,500 per child. And then as people were, the nice part about this ministry was there was just a lot of, it was tangible. These kids were here. They were in our community. They were within the families. They were at basketball games. They were at churches. So people weren't just hearing about, seeing on TV, this is happening. They were actually, in your loved ones and in your neighbors, in their living room, and you were seeing the ministry, rather than just hearing about it. And so more and more people had started to donate. We had one a young girl, I think she was 10 when she started, that she started making cocoa, and she would sell cocoa. And I think the first year she raised like $1,500, and then the next year it doubled. And she's close to raising $20,000 selling cocoa over the course of the years.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
and to stay that focused that long, not just
yeah.
a little start and then get bored with it.
Yeah, not as a 10-year-old child. She's now a senior in high school, and she's still doing it. And so, so obviously, donations. So all of our funding came from personal donations, and occasionally I would cater, and we would do fundraisers. But as the economic climate changed and people started tightening up on their giving, we just had to be more creative in ways. And we have a solid base. I mean, our supporters have been wonderful, even during the hardest times. We've never had to stop our ministry,
I don't think we've ever had to say no.
No, never.
Because of money.
Yeah.
Right.
We've had to say no. International, the relations between our countries have prohibited us. Our own State Department has prohibited us, but we've never had to say no because of money.
Yeah, that's never
and that's
been
a blessing. We've never been reckless. We've never not had a plan. But sometimes the plan is we'll spend until the quarter ends, and we'll get there. And I don't throw the word miracle around, but people would, if you had a business plan the way we did it, they'd call you're foolish. You can't sustain a business on hope, but you can a ministry. And that has been something from the very beginning. Rebecca was tremendous at leveraging. Facebook was kind of new back then. And she would leverage Facebook friends all the way back to high school friends that were able to connect with the technology of Facebook. And this is one of the success of Facebook and social media, that it's able to connect people and allow them to participate in something that changes lives. And it was very tangible. Having the children here in the United States, and the families don't come. So it's just an infant or just a small child. And they always had to be children, so that's part of the visa program, is they needed to be a child in order to qualify. And that to have a person from another culture in Fort Wayne, Indiana, or Battle Creek, Michigan, or Detroit, Michigan, or Ohio, or Minnesota, it's like we used to tell the families, it's like you have the ambassador, and everywhere you go with them, they're going to change lives. And many of our families got into it, ourselves included, thinking we're going to help. We're going to help these children. We're going to help this other culture. And that was our prayer. And I think universally it was, we were helped. I was helped. I was changed. And oh, by the way, the child was helped. And and it worked. People, churches, businesses wanted to be a part of that. If it was $5, if it was selling cocoa, bread sales, garage sales, people wanted to do something. And not everybody wanted a child in their home. Mm-hmm. That takes a lot of commitment to say, yeah, we'll take an infant, a special needs infant, see them through multiple surgeries, love them, care for them, and then send them back. That's not for everybody.
I was going to say, I think I view that as more difficult than just giving money. I think there's a lot more people would have money to give rather than, accept that responsibility.
And that's where we needed all kinds. And then we also needed the medical community. And we've seen that COVID has pretty much halted our medical assistance, doing that model of bringing children to the U.S. for donated medical care. The donated medical care is a requirement for the visa. So you're not allowed to apply for a visa to the United States without the hospital and the physicians and the medical professionals stating in writing that they will donate the care for this child. And that's a lot. That's a lot to ask. We have amazing medical professionals, amazing hospitals that have said yes. They look at the case, the doctors and their professional opinion come up with a medical care plan, and all that's in writing. The host family is all in writing, and then we can apply to the U.S. State Department for a visa, and it's as it should be, a high hurdle. And ray of hope, I've always felt, with God's blessing, has been successful just about all the time. We've had a couple countries that were not getting along with the U.S. at the time, and we were not able to get visas. But to import children is a big deal internationally, and as it should be. Mm-hmm. But that donated care for the hospitals, and then when COVID hit, we still haven't recovered. We haven't had the referrals, but we also haven't had the hospitals, generally hospitals. I think we've had a couple physicians that are ready to, if cases presented, but the hospitals are still hesitant to open up their donated medical care because COVID really wreaked havoc on our system.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I retired, you guys came over, and I greatly appreciate that. But then you went to church with us that Sunday, and you were able to speak with our congregation. And I know that they did some benevolences, then they have to spread it around. But I don't know if it was 2-3 years worth or something like that. But you have started a facility down there, not just bringing children up.
Right.
Can you cover some of that, Rebecca?
So I guess it was another one of my great ideas. I was actually traveling returning a child to their family when I was introduced to this area of, it was just an unreached area. And it's kind of a God moment that I had been in country and we had reunited this family, and I was tired and worn out, and you kind of feel like you're paraded, around. And for a day or two, my liaison, my in-country liaison, was telling me that there was someone that wanted to meet me, but they wouldn't give me any ideas, and I just kept denying it, and almost seemed bothered by it. It was definitely a bout of arrogance, I would say. And I had been out in the village all day, and I got back to the hotel that I was staying in, and I can remember complaining about the shower wasn't hot enough, and the room wasn't big enough, and the fan, that was running wasn't keeping me cool enough, and the bed wasn't comfortable. And it was almost like God came down and it was just a smack, like it was a God smack down. Like, how did you not just witness what I showed you out in the village, where people were finding trash and embedding like underneath their blankets to keep their kids off the cold ground. And, that, yeah, it was just arrogance. I was complaining and feeling sorry for myself, and I had absolutely no reason to. And so I had the next morning gone down and said, okay, I'll meet with them. And so we drove out to this village, and a young girl had approached me, and she kind of opened up this dress that she was wearing, and she had given birth to a cleft baby, and this baby was starving. And they had the only way that they could keep her alive was by offering her cow's milk, which a 6-week-old baby shouldn't be. And they had no way of giving her the milk, so they were just kind of pouring it in her mouth. And it's just, again, a God thing. Kerry had noticed that I had some extra luggage space, and he said, here, take these cleft bottles and take this extra formula. And I was like, I don't need it. And he said, just take it, just in case. And so I met this cleft baby and her mom, and happened to have enough supplies, to keep her alive and I told them I will be back in 10 weeks to get this child. And while I was, processing this, I was in this deeply rural area, and I just started asking questions about, why they didn't have medical care, and why she was given birth at home, and why they were hiding her. And it ended up that they had explained to me that it wasn't a lack of facilities, it was a lack of care. And I was a bit perplexed in that and had questioned a little bit more. And it came down to that women of this kind of twofold. Women didn't seek care to give birth in these medical facilities because they feared being beaten and abused. In Uganda, women are expected to labor in quiet, and they are verbally and physically abused in many facilities, not all facilities, but many facilities, for, making a ruckus. They also, in almost all facilities that I know of in Uganda, if you don't bring the medical supplies, the gloves, the scalpel, the umbilical tie, the pad, to give birth, it's called a mama's pack, you are denied health care. Many don't have that. They don't have the cotton, that they need to bring, and the supplies. And so turned out, I found out in that same trip that the infant maternal mortality rate was 64%. And to me, so, more than half of the births, either mom or baby died. And there was really no good explanation as to why. And so it really just churned in my heart. And one day that we were out there, right before I came home, they showed me this place on a hill, and they said, that the person that owns this is willing to sell it. And, I had already been churning these ideas of like, well, what if we had a resource center or a medical center where, if a baby was born with a cleft lip or a cleft palate, we'd have someone there that knew how to care and could instruct and could help us process and just streamline the process of getting a child to the U.S. And so I gave some money, and I came home and told Kerry, I think I bought land, and I didn't know.
Was there no communication at that point? You just came home and told them?
Yeah.
Because back in those, we didn't communicate. Wi-Fi spots really weren't a thing yet.
Right.
Cell phones didn't bridge the ocean yet. So the communication was very limited.
Very limited. And I knew, honestly, if I called Kerry and said I was going to buy land in Uganda, he'd be like, get on an airplane today. And so I took my chance, and, it ended up, it wasn't quite as legitimate as I was told. And there was a lot of let's call them lessons. I don't know the land purchasing laws of Uganda, and I still don't. It's so confusing. But it turned out that, we started construction, and again, there were some mishaps and some things that had happened that were making that harder than we wanted to. But through all of it and through a lot of reaching out to people and getting the right people involved, both on the Ugandan side and the U.S. side, we were able to construct not just a small medical facility that would become a resource center for children with anomalies, but it actually became a birth center, a maternity birth center. And we opened up for our first birth in May 30th, May 30th in 2019. I was there for the very first birth, which was a very difficult birth. In fact, the child came out unresponsive and not able to breathe, and we weren't expecting to open until June 1st, and so all of our equipment was still in boxes. And as this child was not breathing, and I'm telling my travel partner, Grace, like, I knew there was an oxygen concentrator, but I knew it was in a box, and I knew it was somewhere. And so I, was like, Grace, go find that oxygen concentrator and get it set up. And, she's this nursing student. She had no idea what she was doing. Right. And 32 minutes later, we had a strong pulse and strong heart rate, and baby was breathing, and they named her Hope. Nice. It was our first baby.
Very cool.
And since then, I don't have an exact number for you today, but we are over 1,400 births.
Averaging about a birth and a half a day.
And that's a small village, and I'm sure it's the surrounding area as well, people coming in.
Yeah. So we have about over 1,400 births. We don't charge for our services. All of our supplies are given. No one has to come with anything. Our midwives are extremely talented. It's just been a super blessing. You really God is super palpable there. And we haven't done anything. God, with the combination of having talented midwives and God's presence and women willing to go there now, they have successfully lowered the infant maternal mortality rate to less than 1%.
That's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not, we did not export advanced maternity obstetric care. This is a standard level of care that's available in country. All of our staff are Ugandans, all Ugandan trained. This is their level of care, and we do it with the Western cleanliness. And Rebecca brought up the kindness and compassion. And again, from a Western perspective, it would be unheard of to hit a laboring mother because she was taking too long or labor wasn't progressing. That's quite normal in the Ugandan culture, down in the rural villages where we live at, where anybody with knowledge or experience or professional really does look down on the different classes of people in their country. Obviously, everybody's Black, so there's not a racism thing, but there definitely is a classism, which isn't structured like the Hindu caste system. But if you have a professional midwife dealing with a local village girl having her first child in difficulty, they definitely, from our perspective, would mistreat. And all of our midwives were, I can't do that. And the midwife Rebecca hired to begin with was a child, her family had a lot of children. So she experienced her mom giving birth as a young girl and saw how her mom was treated and just vowed she wanted to be a midwife, but she was never going to operate like that. And then our paths, she had 3 or 4, maybe 5 years experience when our paths crossed, and she became our head midwife.
Mm-hmm.
And we deliver clean with our donors and with Ray of Hope's underwriting. We have a clean, Ugandan, culturally appropriate, modern facility, but it's under the auspices of Christ. We're sharing Christ's love, and we're doing it in a kind and compassionate way. And it was like the medical assistance program. We don't require you to be a Christian. We don't go out and only look for Christian women to come in. We open our arms and our doors to anybody presenting. Women come day or night. Their culture's a little bit differently. They don't know when they're due. They certainly don't prearrange with a medical facility, but they show up at the Hope Center 24 hours a day, and it's guaranteed that you're going to be treated well. You're going to get the best care available. And it's a huge blessing to see. Really, it's a huge blessing to get to be a part of what God is doing.
Do the midwives live there, or do they do shift work?
They do shift work. They work, there's somebody on shift 24 hours a day. It's a little different in their culture. I think all of our midwives are from, and in our world, it would be like a neighborhood. They're from a different neighborhood, and they have different homes. So they would come to the Hope Center and they'll work kind of more like a firefighter. They'll work 7 on,
sure,
12 on, days on, straight in a row. And then they'll take all of their days off for a month and go back to their home village. But the other half of our staff, all of the non-technical staff, are local. So they do live within walking distance, usually at literally a stone's throw distance from the Hope Center. But all of the midwives have dwellings where they sleep, and several of them are single moms. So their babies are across the street in their rooms, and they have young village girls that help take care of them.
Well, that might help the birthing mothers too, to have that consistency of care of seeing the same person there, not just a different person every 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all of our midwives, local housing is provided for them. So they have become actually part of the community. Now they do have their family homes, or, and when I say family homes, it's usually their mother and father back in a different village that they'll go and stay with. But their primary residents are right there. And, so if a mom comes in at 3 a.m, there's always someone on duty. And if it's a difficult birth or if they need additional hands, they'll send our security guard over, and there'll be 3-4 other midwives ready to jump in.
And you on the phone early on?
Occasionally I am on the phone, yeah.
You might have been on one during our first visit. You might have been sitting in that chair, that couch over there on the phone, if I remember right.
Yeah, occasionally, it's not that I can do anything. Sometimes they just need the reassurance, that they just need to know that, hey, you've got this and you're doing everything. And so it's not even like I'm not even a labor and delivery nurse. I'm a craniofacial nurse. But a lot of times it's just them needing to know that that we have the utmost confidence that they are the best that they can do. And we were very open and honest right away when we were hiring not just our in charge midwife, but all of our midwives, that we had told them we expect for you to be different. And the difference is going to be that you are not going to verbally or physically abuse a mother or anyone for that matter.
Well, that reminds me of the Chosen. We were talking about that, Jimbo, at lunch today, and we watched that series also. And one of the things that we remember from the first episode is they, in the show, the disciples were always talking to Jesus about how this is different. We've never done things like this before, Jesus. This is crazy. And the line became, "Get used to different." Mm-hmm. And Rebecca said that many times, because it's a balance. of we're going into a different culture, drastically different, economically, socially, environmentally, and we want to balance, hey, there's a better way to do this with respecting how they do things. And some of it was, things that you might take for granted, cleanliness, professionalism, being loving, non-judgmental. And we heard a lot early on, oh, well, we don't do that. We've never done that. And Rebecca say, get used to different, because there's
With a smile on your face.
yeah. And
Sometimes not.
sometimes
Yeah,
it's unapologetically that we, one of the things, just as an example, in Uganda, in rural southern Uganda where we're at, it's not untypical. The laboring mother will come in the third stage of labor, which she'll give birth probably within 30 to 45 minutes, on a motorcycle, driven by a stranger, with her overnight bag and all of her birthing supplies, not knowing anybody at the center. There was no antenatal visits. They just show up. I'm going to have a baby in about 30 minutes. The mother would labor very quietly. There might be an attendant would show up. It might be her mom or a mother-in-law. One might be with her, and she would have the baby, and they would get back on the motorcycle within hours. The mom gets up and walks from the bed that she gave birth in to immediately, generally would lay on the floor, not at the Hope Center, but in other birthing centers would be a mat on the floor, and she would go home on a motorcycle within hours.
Wow.
And that was normal. That would be, if we did that, you guys would be, oh, you Westerners, that's great. You're so great. And Rebecca said, no. We are going to keep them offer. I mean, we don't prevent them from leaving, but we explain to them, we would like you to stay for 24 hours. We have a room for you. That's an actual bed. We have a crib for the baby. We have a nurse on duty. Your one attendant is welcome to stay in the room with you, and we'll feed you. We'll provide you 3 meals, so the mom gets sometimes her best meal within months is the 3 meals she gets after delivery. Those are provided free of charge. And then 24 hours later, her and the baby will go home. And that was one of those situations of, we don't do it like that. And Rebecca said, we'll get used to different, because we are now. And now 3 years into it, the staff looks back on it like it's just normal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the wins and losses, but that was certainly a win to show them.
Well, it's definitely it's been a major factor in lowering that maternal mortality, because postpartum hemorrhaging, doesn't happen immediately. A lot of, that can happen 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 hours after giving birth. Mm-hmm. And traditionally when they would go home and hemorrhage, there's not enough medical care fast enough, to manage a postpartum hemorrhaging. And so changing that definitely has attributed to lowering that. And I think the midwives, started to see that. And now, even just yesterday, they had said this mother's refusing to stay, and I was like, well, you can't keep her,
right?
If you explain to her. And I think they got her to stay, for 14 hours or something. She just didn't want to stay an extra night. But even, just simple things like
starting the IV.
Starting an IV, that, it cost 15 cents, to have a catheter and
an IV catheter.
An IV catheter. And they would only do it when a mother was in distress, or would only do it when they had to administer oxytocin. And there were several times that I was there that, I would question, like, why doesn't she have a line started? And, oh, well, we didn't know. And it's like, well, you never know you're going to need a line until you know that you need a line, and so when I introduced the new protocol of every mother gets an IV started on admission, I I admire and I respect that they were worried about the expense, of waste, that they, saw it. But I thought, for even 25 cents a patient, I'm willing to do that as opposed to trying to get a line in a mom that, is tanking very quickly.
Right.
And, so not only did they have to combat this, well, we just don't do it, but then I had to realize and understand that they had to start counseling mothers and explaining to mothers because they don't do that in any other health facility. And so, at the beginning, some mothers were not allowing them to. And we had to take a hard line. And we had gotten to the point that if a mother was not in immediate need of, labor and delivery services, meaning the baby's not crowning or
Right.
coming very quickly, that if they refused to get an IV a line started prior to them giving birth on admission, then we would refer them to another facility. And I don't know that we have any problems with moms now with it. And, again, it was like, well, just what if they don't need it? Well, great. They don't need it. Cap it, and but it's the ones that do need it that you don't want to be fishing around for an IV, when you've got a mom and, in trouble. And so
Much better to be prepped.
yeah. Yeah. And so it's just, it's changing those kind of beliefs.
And then it's the wisdom of knowing the difference.
Right.
When do you just leave the way they do it, even though it seems odd to us? Because there are ways that the West doesn't know everything. And some things we have to tread lightly. We've made our mistakes. We've learned our lessons of leave well enough alone and let their culturally have figured this out. That was the Hope Center started as the maternity, and I would knock on wood, we've been very successful, made a huge impact in the area we're at, and we've grown. Other opportunities have presented itself that Rebecca had the idea, is because it's a very, that area is very agricultural. Many of the residents that live, they're farmers, and they grow what they need to eat, or they grow some that they can trade, and that's how they exist. And our Western minds come in to say, well, what about this and what about that? Well, Rebecca had the idea. One of the first things was, well, let's hire a trainer, a Ugandan trainer from the big city to come down. Her and her team, their ministry was to teach women how to make baskets. And Rebecca hired this group to come down, had the staff at the Hope Center seek women, marginalized women, who could benefit from learning to make these baskets. And they came down and they came to the center. Many of the women who'd given birth at the center, I think all of the women have since given birth. They're all of childbearing age. And the lady came down and taught them to make baskets. And 3 years later, that was shortly after the Hope Center opened. Many of them are still making baskets as a living with local materials and the things that they need. They're learning entrepreneurial skills with managing their money and buying the supplies they need and acquiring the materials, and they're making baskets where beforehand they didn't have that. And so we've expanded outside of the just the maternal birthing process to there's other things that we can be doing where we're at.
Now, when you bought that land, what structures were on it?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
Because I've seen the pictures and videos of what they've built. So describe what you have now compared to when you first bought it.
It was a hillside,
hillside
overgrown with trees and shrubs.
With dirt. A lot of red dirt. I think just if we digress a little bit, with the medical side of it, a lot of people immediately think, well, gosh, it must cost, millions to run this. And we have 10 staff members. We supply everything. Our staff members are paid very well.
Very well.
That all the supplies are given, all of the utilities, everything it takes to run the Hope Center, including offering services and being stocked. We've never run out of drugs. We've never run out of supplies. A mother has never come that we've said, oh, sorry, we don't have cotton. And we do all of that on $3,600 a month.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's with salaries, overhead, everything.
Very economical. Your dollar goes a long way.
Yes.
And that's, so we've...
But even the Ugandans are shocked. Like when we talk to doctors or we talk to other, facilities, and they come in and they're like, oh, I need, in order for me to work here, I need, $4 million a month. And like, man, I run this entire thing off of $9 million. That
9 million what?
Shillings.
Shillings. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to clarify that.
Yes,
Yeah,
9
we're not
million
talking dollars,
shillings,
right,
which is
this
about
minute.
$3,000.
Yeah.
That it's so hard because we've proven that this can be done, and it can be done economically, and it can be done well. But just like the U.S., it's like, no one believes that it can be done well, unless you're spending literally millions of US dollars, on facilities, and that you're spending tens of thousands a month on, on overhead and expenses. And it's just not the case. And that's where we have been diligent about being fiscally responsible. We take being stewards of the donations that are given. We take being the steward of that money extremely seriously, and we're not wasteful.
If we were to, we've put our money into infrastructure. Mm-hmm. We've bought the land. So we like Rebecca said, we had some lessons learned. Like life, lessons cost money. So we've got legal title of the property, and we're continuing to put infrastructure in. So what started, how many square feet is the Hope Center?
Gosh, I don't know.
That'd be a number I need to figure out.
Yeah.
It's, but the medical clinic, that building, the original building, houses one midwife. At one point, I think 3 midwives lived in that building. It has a delivery room, an antenatal room, or kind of a pre-admit room, 3 maternal recovery rooms, 2 patient bathrooms, a storeroom, and then
An office.
and an office. And then on the other side, there's, at one point it was 3 bedrooms. Mission teams slept there before, multiple midwives, and
Was considered, one of the rooms was considered my house. It was like,
and now I think we have about 11 acres.
mm-hmm.
We have
solar.
We're all off grid, so we collect all of our solar electricity stored on property, used on property. Water, we collect all of the water is from the rain off of the roofs and the gutters. We collect it in the ground. Use solar energy to pump it to above ground tanks. We filter it, which is very unheard of. And we filter and we give away quite a lot of water. Many of our staff and our local Ugandan family, not by birth, not legally, but just our family, built on love, they come and get water, and it's drinkable. And to them, that was another, well, we don't do that here. Well, we came in with filters, and our water's renewable. It doesn't cost us a thing. Occasionally during their dry season, we'll have to pay and get lake water brought to us. But as we filter it, it's free to filter, and we can give away clean drinking water. And
do you remember the day that we filled up a bottle and we had antenatal moms in there, and we were showing them that this is the water and that you could drink out of the faucets. Like that was the lesson, was like, hey, when you're here and you're giving birth, you can drink out of these faucets. You don't need to boil it. It's safe for you. It's safe for, baby bottles if we have to do it. And so I had to be the first person to to drink.
Yeah, we installed
You're
the
the court
filters.
jester.
We tested the water. It tested good.
And no one was taking a drink of that water. And so it was like one of those moments that I was like, okay, Rebecca.
Yeah, put your money where your mouth is.
So I drank that water, and all night I just remember being like, man, I hope it works, because I have to get on an airplane in a couple days. And
Because that was your first time ever drinking out of
first
it. Then.
time
Okay, I didn't
ever
realize that.
drinking local water, and nobody would do it. And so for them to see a Mzungu, which is what they call the white travelers, as Mzungu, it means dizzy traveler and confused traveler. And evidently we all looked confused when we get off the airplanes. But for them to, they are accustomed to the Mzungus taking every precaution to not drinking the water, not eating the food, not eating the fruits off the trees. And so when they saw Kerry from the faucet, put it in a bottle, and I drank it, I think all of them, there were a couple audible gasps, like, oh gosh. And I did it. There were no repercussions. I was perfectly fine. And so now
it's standard.
Now everyone drinks out of it. And so
so we
have a pavilion, which
we've secured the perimeter. So we have an aesthetically pleasing wall or a gate fence around the property for security. We have multiple buildings. One of the things, lessons learned, is we found an honest, reputable, very quality contractor from the big city, who his methodology is he makes the bricks on site. So they're more like Legos than the traditional brick and mortar method. So we've had multiple buildings that he's constructed, a pavilion that it has a kitchen. So when the teams are there, we have the ability to cook on site with refrigerators on the solar system. We've built we call it the Banda, but it's living quarters for the Westerners when we come in country, and we can house eight Westerners in 2-person rooms, and 2 rooms share a bathroom. So now it's the ability for Westerners to experience missions, living on mission, but acknowledging that it is quite a culture shock for us. So we have Western toilets, stand-up showers, warm water. It's very, very comfortable for Westerners.
It does have comforts of home, but like Kerry had said, it's, when you're dealing with people that are going out of country, mission trips, a lot of times mission trips end up being managing personalities, and there's bouts of homesickness, and, there's a lot of things that go on. And so having those simple, comforts of home tend to, and it entices people, like I'm not a squatter, and so the idea that I can go to the restroom at any time and not have to squat over a hole, which I did once, and a lizard popped out of it.
Oh,
and,
great.
It was like I finally mustered the courage that I'm going to do this. And then this lizard popped out of the hole, and I was like, okay, I'm never doing this again. And I would say Ugandan standards, it looks extremely lavish. It's beautiful, and it's Ugandan standards. It's resort-like. But again, I think we probably do spend a little bit more money with this new builder, but we know 15, 20 years from now, we won't be replacing it. When we were trying to save money on the initial buildings, we're replacing most of them already. So that was one of the lessons learned, is that, definitely go more quality controlled. So, I mean, when you look at it and the landscaping that's happening, and it is beautiful.
Well, the area is beautiful on its own,
Yeah.
And I'll post some pictures on this video
yeah,
as
and
well.
as you can see the pictures, it's very, very lush. It's very green. We're about 60 miles south of the equator. So if you look on a map, it's 60 miles south of the equator, and it's just beautiful. It's the temperature's beautiful, the people are beautiful, and the work that we put in. So when we're there, we can eat on site, we can stay on site. So it allows us to bring teams, and we can immerse ourselves in village life, and it's very safe. It's one of the questions people ask: is it safe? Oh yeah, I mean safe from crime. Nobody's going to hurt you. Nobody's going to rob you.
We don't let you have any money, so they can't rob you anyway. You have to keep your money.
The biggest hazard is getting a stomach bug or something. That's not atypical when you travel internationally. But your heart, you're going to fall in love with Africa, fall in love with the people. And it's really, you have to experience to see that we're not exporting love or hope. It's there. God's there. God's working. He uses us, and we get to go see and be a part of it. And Ray of Hope now is, several years ago, we adopted missions trips as one of our pillars, our cores.
I was going to ask you how often you guys go.
Yeah, we go. We've been going since COVID 3 times a year. Our goal has been 4. That's been a little difficult to achieve. But since COVID and me retiring, now Rebecca and I can do it together, which is really nice for Rebecca, that she gets to have more time with me and I can help.
Absolutely. He's very helpful.
Very helpful as I am. And
Yes.
and we get to take 6 other people with us. And yeah, and everybody could imagine 6 human beings spending 24 hours together for 2 weeks internationally is a challenge. It's a challenge on a marriage. It's a challenge for best friends. But like Ray of Hope, there's been a sub tagline, it's good, wholesome, righteous growth doesn't happen without difficulty, pain, suffering. And we noticed that back when we were really focused on the medical, when we'd bring children here and I would coach the parents prior to that, this is going to hurt. But through this hurt, there's going to be growth. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with the mission trips, is going internationally. There's going to be struggle. There's going to be a lot of emotions and feelings that you're going to uncover in your own right. And we've had people that are pretty, here in our culture, strong, whether they're medical types or they're professional business people. They get over there, and I had one lady, I was like, I can't believe I'm crying all the time. All I do is cry. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. You're safe here. God's got stuff you're working through, and he's using these newborn babies, these sometimes very young mothers. It's culturally, it's pretty shocking to our system, and it's an opportunity to allow the Holy Spirit to work in your life. And that's another area that the healing occurs full circle. You don't go there to help Ugandans. Do we help them? Yeah. I think we help develop them. But part of our core beliefs is that we're taking people over there, that God is going to do just as much work on your heart, in your life, in your growth, that he is on the Ugandans.
If people that happen to see this would like to participate or at least talk with you guys about participating, where would they go?
By the time this comes to air, hopefully rohmm.org, rayofhopemedicalmissions.org, rohmm.org will be up and running. We're in the process of revamping the website. We're very active on Facebook and Instagram. If you just search for Ray of Hope Medical Missions, you'll see us. One of the things we do is every baby that's born, you normally see pretty fresh newborn pictures. And then when mother and baby, and we're getting more fathers, that's been one of our project goals, is to, in their culture, it is not typical for the father to be involved in any part of the birthing. Mm-hmm. Mom comes alone on a motorcycle, maybe with a mother-in-law or a grandma, and they go home. And one of our midwives, and Rebecca, said, in our culture, it's very common these days for the father to be with the mom, and we're encouraging that, and we are moderately successful in getting husband or the fathers of the children involved.
We've had some. We've had some that have gone all through labor and have cut the cords, and
Well, that word will get around.
yeah. Well,
And
That's the way to affect some change.
yeah.
Yeah. So so we post those pictures on social media, Facebook and Instagram. No, not Instagram, just Facebook.
Right. We even have fathers that come to the antenatal appointments,
Which
with
would be
their wives.
the prenatal.
That's like the prenatal appointment. We've had one we've had several that the moms didn't come with an attendant, and the father stayed back and took care of mom and the baby postpartum. So.
Which is some of that get used to different because that's not culturally normal.
They take a ration for it, though. They do get like harassed for
Yeah, I
it
was
a
going to
little
say
bit.
the word will get around, but some might be hesitant for that word because of that.
Right.
But it'll get around no matter what. You
Well,
can't
and
help
that's
that.
what I tell guys, when people will ask about the mission trips, like, oh, do you have to be a nurse? No, it is Ray of Hope Medical Missions, but we're involved in the whole circle of life. Every aspect of life is game. But the women do get to be a part of the birthing, and but there's guys, there's fathers, there's all the men of the village. There's a lot to do within your expertise that we have. I've told other people that as Westerners, we almost have a PhD in life when you go over to Uganda. And just our life experience, full spectrum. If you can use a computer and open up, Google Sheets and type out a letter and print it, that's a PhD. Over there, you'd be teaching about mouse clicks.
And last week you were telling me how you have to fight to stay humble in that atmosphere.
Oh, yeah.
And not have that, affect you because you're, definitely no better than anybody else. But
Yeah, there was a
when they
time-
view you that way, can get tough.
One of the challenges and one of the areas that we want to try to teach and encourage is on the area of honesty and truthfulness. So Rebecca and I have taken some training, and it's a participatory type of learning, and we get around and we look up verses and we talk about what does it mean, and it was all about honesty and telling the truth. And it was a lot. It was difficult. A 1-hour lesson took about half a day, and I felt just okay. It worked. I did it. I practiced what our instructors had taught us, and we were cleaning up, and multiple people, the locals, came up to me and was just so appreciative of all my knowledge and my wisdom. And I said, whoa. I said, I just know these Bible stories because I grew up in the church. I go, I'm a sinner. I struggle every day to be the person I think Jesus created. I go, but I'm just like you. I just have a little bit more knowledge. And it's a challenge. Our own humanness wants to, I think it's very natural. I know both Rebecca and I have dealt with it. All of the teams, people involved with Ray of Hope, at some point we've seen it, and I think everybody, that you really have to check your God complex is kind of what the literature talks about, or a Messiah complex, that we're not saving anybody. God can use the bit of knowledge that we have, whether it be medical or social and economic. We are very fortunate in the West. Our generation grew up with conjunction junction. When Saturday morning cartoons was teaching us how to link our verbs, how a bill becomes a law. That stuff they have no idea. I forget what we were doing. We were doing something, and we were installing a network. And I had a professional Ugandan IT person was there, and some of the locals were watching because we're installing computer stuff, and I knew a little bit, and I was willing to try to make the cables and put the connections on in there. They were just amazed that one person knows so much stuff. And they're like, how do you know all this stuff? I said, I'm just willing to try. And you can too. Here, let me show you. And there's another huge thing we can do is just show them how to use a power tool, how to use hand tools properly, because they don't. They're one of the another cultural thing to them is if you have knowledge, you don't share it. Where in our culture, it's like everybody on YouTube is trying to share what they know. But in Ugandan culture, if you know how to do something, you don't tell other people how to do it because you want them to come to you.
Right.
And so when we come in country and it's like, no, let me show you how to use a Sawzall. Let me show you how to take medical records. And they're just dumbfounded that we're willing to teach and then take the time to show them and let them try it. And it's anybody who's been a parent or a teacher knows that it's 10 times harder to teach your kid to mow the grass than just go do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we do differently with our mission teams is we don't go do. You know, we don't do, and I don't mean to.
We don't go with an agenda or with a building team to
Yeah,
build
we
a
don't go to
latrine.
do, we don't
go to
build
do,
fences,
but
we don't go to paint school, because they can do all that.
They have builders.
They
They've
have
got plumbers,
builders, and
they
that's different than your old school short-term mission trips where we're going to go and all the Western people are going to get together and we're going to build this or we're going to do, and it's very do. You're tired at the end of the day. We go and we encourage. You know, we've got professional midwives. We don't need to take people to deliver babies. We've got that. But if you're a medical professional and you can go encourage our midwives, or you can show them, like, here, let me show you how I chart. If you're handy and you can go change a lock, let me show you how to use a chisel or how we would do this, running cable, just anything that you can just come alongside them. But at the end of the day, it's to love them, to show them that you matter, you know, to tell a Ugandan mom that you matter. You know what? That, you know, God created you and you matter.
Well, and they're seen. I think that's the one thing that I was most surprised about was that they didn't even realize that the Westerners knew that they were out there. You know, that they didn't even realize they were seen or that we even thought of them. And so I think we've always said that our mission trips are about connecting, about two humans connecting. And it's not about whether or not you can deliver a baby or you know how to run electricity or build a water filter. If you have the desire to go and connect with another human being and to just love someone, then this is absolutely the trip for you. We don't go with an agenda. You're never going to see me hand out at 11 o'clock we're going to eat and at 2 o'clock we're going to go do that. That's not. I think God does his greatest work when he just sets a fire in your heart, and that fire can be ablazed at 2 a.m. It can be done at 2 p.m. It could be when you're, walking up the hill, and when you have a schedule. I don't believe that. I don't even know that I'm as open to God, giving me God-given moments of if I'm on a schedule. And so we really try to take that away. But going back to the trips, as far as what, people can do is, you're right. You don't have to be a nurse. You don't have to be a medical professional. You don't have to be a contractor. You just have to be willing. You literally just have to be willing. Carrie's done a phenomenal job over the last couple of years. I've always been very concentrated on the medical side and the birth center side and the medical assistant side, which is still very much my passion. But he has been able to expand the ministry into working with Junior Achievement Uganda, identifying these vulnerable youth and giving them very basic business skills, giving opportunities for the entrepreneurial spirit to come out, bringing the community together, just having activities. And I mean, the plumber has learned from, as much as you've learned from their plumber, he's learned from you. And it really is just, it is no longer just about a maternity center.
Right.
Yeah.
And you guys are very busy people, and you're touching people here as well. and you can see she's on her phone because she has to be on her phone. She's messages from Uganda, messages from downtown.
The
So why
sandwich
don't
shop
you,
is actually who's texting me right
we
now.
got to cover that before we close this section, because the second section will be about Kerry's military career. But you gotta close out by telling us what you have going on here besides what's going on in Uganda.
Well, when Kerry said he's going to retire at 51 years old, I went into pure panic mode, of like, I don't know. With him being in the military, there was a lot of travel, a lot of TDYs, a lot of deployments, a lot of time away. And so it was well suited for me to be the stay-at-home mom. And so I've been the stay-at-home mom, ever since Ray of Hope started. And now all of a sudden I get this news that my world is about to be rocked because my stay-at-home position is now going to have a helper.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm thinking a helper for the next 20, 25, 30 years. Like,
Would be wonderful.
it's frightening is a word that I would describe. Ray of Hope, it's still such a passion of mine, but constant fundraising was, it's hard.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. And I felt like people were dodging me. Like my friends would be like, just gonna ask for money, run, and I did feel like it was time for me to, the kids are raised. I didn't feel like I felt like it was time for me to not just be going back and forth to Uganda, but having something to do every day. And as much as I love Kerry, I really didn't want to hang out with him every day. And so the opportunity came up.
That's very common thing.
Yeah, that's
not just you, Kerry.
I've heard that before.
All the couples out there.
Yeah, it's like,
Can't wait till some of the other guys see this. We'll see if they comment on that.
Yeah, like I said, I love him. I love our time together, but 24/7, especially going, and anyone that's in the military life knows that, being a military wife, I had the ability to be very independent. That someone had to take care of things. And, I liked TDYs occasionally. I liked that the kids and I could eat cereal or, go warm up toast or a can of corn and not have to do a full-blown dinner.
Right.
I liked that I could sit and watch nonsense on TV and have no responsibility or feel like he's judging me. And that ended when he retired. And so long story short, an opportunity came up that there was a new facility opening up here in Fort Wayne, and they were doing a food hall. And if you remember, we talked about how Ray of Hope started with it was being funded by me catering. So I threw out the idea to Kerry and then to friends of ours that also have a very small nonprofit of, hey, what if we went into this, we started a sandwich shop, and the business model would be that all profits would go back to the two charities, our charity and Scott and Stacy's charity. And so we took a leap of faith and we opened up a sandwich shop. It's called Boyamba Sandwich Company, which is actually the village that we are at in Uganda is, we are in Bugando, which is basically a suburb of Boyamba, if you will. I guess that's the best way to.
And we'll show a picture that you're south-facing from the center is the town of Boyamba.
Right. And so Boyamba means to help. And so when we were searching for a name and...
Or small fish.
Small fish, but we'll go with the help part. That knowing that this was actually going to go back into these two charities. So it seemed fitting. So we have, so Boyamba was born. We have been open, since March, end of March. So anyone who can do the quick math on that is about 9 months. It's been incredible. It's been able to, it's given me an outlet. It's been, every day I go to work and now it's not just I'm doing God's work. And I know that every time we serve a customer, that the profits are going back into these charities, which I love and have such passion for. But I've made friends. We have a very regular customer base, and so I've been known to say it's like I make lunch for my friends every day.
Nice.
It's given me a social outlet, which I love. You don't usually have that as a stay-at-home mom, and so I have an active social life with reconnecting with people. I don't ever consider myself an active evangelist, but it has given me multiple opportunities to talk about God and God's work and not be uncomfortable doing so.
And it's by example. That was something that you, while I certainly respect people who evangelize that are very brazen about it, there's also a way that you can just live differently so that when people ask the question, the answer is Jesus. Mm-hmm. Why do you work every day to give your profits away? Because of Jesus. And you don't have to come out and say it like that, but it's apparent that you're different. And trying to live your life being different on purpose, intentionally, is a challenge, And I remember one time before I retired, only one of us could go to Uganda. So there was a time she was gone to Uganda, and I was goofing off, and I put the Ray of Hope logo on the side of her minivan. Well, at first it was kind of funny, and she liked it, and then she realized that now you're driving around, you represent. And I feel like that we're that way as Christians. Mm-hmm. Once you come out, and we have a really nice wooden cross that's made by a guy that I served with in the comm flight, made this really nice wooden cross that we have up at the restaurant. And now as Christians, when you make it public that this is a restaurant based on Christian values, you don't have to be a Christian to work there, but we do create an environment. Rebecca does a terrific job of creating a family-like environment in the restaurant industry. It's a challenge. But we treat our customers in a way that I would want my mom to be treated. Mm-hmm. And that also Jesus, watching over our shoulder, would be proud of the way we treat our customers and the way we teach our staff to treat people, even when they're just jerks. Mm-hmm. You still treat them the way you would want your mom treated. And it's a huge platform for her. I heard one of the 18-year-olds has become really good friends. And Rebecca has the opportunity now to go beyond a boss, beyond a maternal figure, because she was our kid's mom, and that's a particular role. But now she has this really neat hybrid of boss, friend, mother, with a lot of life experience to share with these young ladies that work at the restaurant. Mm-hmm. And even people who don't work at the restaurant, they just work at Electric Works. And it is a really neat, and we serve good food. Rebecca's an amazing cook.
Oh yeah, it is good.
Anybody who's experienced Rebecca knows that she's an amazing cook, and she gets to share that. And she's got, this I don't know what, this glow about her that it's kind of cliche, but you get to go to work. But she gets to go. She has a commercial kitchen that's Board of Health certified that she can now make stuff, mm-hmm. Whether it be her brownies or cookies or different things. She gets to do that, and it's clear that she loves what she does. And as a business, of the four owners, she's the one owner that's salaried. She works every day, and she's doing a terrific job in the business. We've already donated $10,000 to each of the nonprofits. Mm-hmm. And we as a business, we haven't shown a profit yet. This is our first, like Ray of Hope was our first venture in the nonprofit. Neither one of us had any experience with nonprofits. Neither one of us had ever run a business before. And we went into business with two other people. They had also. One's a pastor and other's an HR professional. None of us had ever run a restaurant. And we're doing it. And so we're learning. Like life, learning costs money. So every time we order too much or we have waste, that costs money. But we made the decision early on that we were going to pay our staff extra. So we pay on average about $2 more an hour than the going rate. But all tips and gratuities go to the nonprofits direct.
Right. And they know that.
And they know that. We talked with our very first crew of employees as we decided the public wants to give. You know, we're a tipping culture, whether you like that or not, we are. So we put a tip jar out, and
is it labeled so people know that all that goes?
Yep, all that. You know, we wanted to be very above board. We don't take it from the employees. The employees are talked to early on that, hey, we're going to pay you more. So on the slow, you know, Sunday evenings that you don't make very many tips, you're going to get a wage. But on the busy Saturdays, all of those extra tips that you get are going to go to a charitable cause, which we hope they all buy into.
They're all very proud of it, actually.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, they are. When I talk about it, because people will bring it up or we talk about it, and especially, you know, my daytime, like you can, and I think I even had the conversation. I was like, you can be proud of that. And, you know, the conversation came when like, oh, you can't be prideful. I'm like, no. Like that, no, you can absolutely be proud that that you go to work every day, you put your time, your effort, your talent, and that you are sacrificing. You know,
it's a humble pride,
absolutely,
not a prideful.
Well, I remember I was asking about that. I was working with my own personal counselor, and we're talking about that very thing. That, you know, when I do something for somebody else, it feels good, and I've always heard that's pride. I worked hard and I got good grades, or I worked hard and I built this, or I made that, or I helped someone, and that feels good. I go, but I've always taught pride was bad. And this wise man told me, he said, no, that's joy. That feeling God gave us, that when you do something like that, it's joy. Because sometimes it doesn't feel good, right? Sometimes you do something that's righteous that hurts. Sometimes you have to give up something to help somebody else, and it's not good for you because you changed to someone's tire, but you're filthy now. But that you still feel good about it. And he said, well, that's joy. And that's what our employees get to feel. They get to feel joy knowing that they're benefiting something bigger than themselves. And that was kind of a neat revelation. And that was about 3 months ago. You know, so about 6 months into our first restaurant business, the restaurant gave away $20,000 to these nonprofits.
Very cool.
And about that.
And we're getting close to that. I'm learning to do the books, you know, so I grew up, you know, I was an RA at the squadron. So I knew Air Force accounting, and I knew Dave Ramsey accounting. And so now I'm learning business accounting, which is, that's a whole nother, but it's worth it because it's given me an outlet, you know, so that Rebecca and she does the operations, and I do the back office stuff.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you an odd question. What time is it?
It's 5:12.
5:12.
Yeah.
Okay. You didn't know if you had enough to talk about, but we've been going for about an hour and a half.
An hour and a half.
She needs to get back to the sandwich shop. That's the deal here. So she's probably talking to people there saying, I'll be right there.
Yeah,
Actually, you want to be honest with you? I'm telling Franny that we have the door to the cat's litter box closed. And so I was texting Franny to let the cat into the back room.
Well, and you might be hearing some claws too. We got a little dog here. And this is their home.
It is my home.
We're in their home.
Yep. So.
People come in and out of the door.
It's Ray of Hope headquarters. It's Boyamba headquarters.
It is. It is all those things.
The time that you need to run from. So.
I do. I have to. I'm going to pull the night shift at the sandwich shop tonight.
Well,
so.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you,
I really
Jimbo.
appreciate you taking the time to do this because we were trying to work it in, and that's why most of the podcasts have been military based, but then we've also talked about other things that are going on in their lives. So we covered that first. We're going to let you go back to work. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to go into Kerry's military career.
All right, love it.
So, all right, we'll be back.
Thank you.
Hello again, this is Jimbo, and this is Franny. And Franny came into the Ghent household at what age?
3.
3 years old.
Yeah.
So that's pretty young. And
Yeah.
have you been here ever since?
Yes, I have not been able to travel back.
Uh-huh.
Except for one time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that just a little closer to you. Okay, so you're able to go back one time?
I did, but that was against doctor's orders.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because it was best for you to be near American doctors here.
Yes.
So you came at 3 years old. What do you remember first, or as you were young?
I do remember being on the plane and throwing a fit with my escort.
The escort.
Yeah. I think he wanted me to carry something, and I just refused. I think I threw it down on the ground and screamed.
Mm-hmm. Well,
That's what
you're 3 years old. You're taken out of your world. You're on this airplane for first time.
Yeah.
Did you even know where you were going, or were you told where you were going?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm sure not at 3. I mean, 3's pretty young.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How old were you when you were able to go back?
I think I was maybe about 4 when they sent me back.
Still really young then.
Yeah.
Hard to remember stuff back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do remember being in the hospital
Mm-hmm.
one time. I was wanting to watch something when Mama, Rebecca, came in and was like, "Oh, I'll help you," and started typing in what I was saying. And then I remember after a while being in the hospital, we went to a concert.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what I remember.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's so young to be remembering a lot of stuff about your past.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you remember like trying to learn English? Was it difficult? Was it easy?
So about the English thing, I was in a coma,
Mm-hmm.
and I went in speaking fluent French, an accent, like nothing about English.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into that coma, and then when I came out, I spoke fluent English, no accent, and it was like a switch went off.
Really?
Yeah. So it wasn't really learning English.
Mhm.
I just woke up and knew it.
Wow. That's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Pretty wild, I should
yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you were, I mean, I presume you were probably about 5 when you just started school
Yeah.
up here. And
Yeah. 5 years old in school.
Mhm.
It's schooling was kind of a back and forth kind of thing.
Mhm.
Through first grade and kindergarten through 2nd grade, I went to public school.
Mhm.
And then 3rd grade through 5th grade, I was homeschooled. And then I went back to public school for another year of 5th grade, and then went to a private school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like a on and off kind of thing.
Right. Kind of a learning deal of
Yeah.
where you would thrive more
Yeah.
than another place. And
Yeah.
so you got a taste of homeschooling, huh?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you have a little bit more free time with homeschooling, depending on how fast you learn
Yeah.
what you're being taught.
Yeah.
So with homeschooling, was there certain tests that you had to take, at the end of each semester? How does that? I don't really know how homeschool works.
So for this, there was one of the host families who volunteered to homeschool me, and my little brother Usedi. And so we went there, and they did give us a few tests once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember for reading and writing, there was this book called Climbing to Good English, and I had to do it every morning
Mm-hmm.
to get better at English. And I remember hating it, no, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. What are the subjects you like the best now?
I love reading. I love history and science
Nice.
and Bible class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Well, with all 4 of those, that
Yeah.
sounds like you've got a pretty promising future ahead of you.
yeah.
So, okay. Well, I'm not going to hold you too long. I know I put her right on the spot. I was like, let's just sit down. She watched me
Yeah.
put all this together. She was very interested. She asked how much cameras were. So maybe you have an interest in doing something like this later, or working with electronic equipment, or
Yeah.
who knows. Or was I heard a little rumor about maybe something you wanted to be when you grow up. What do you want to be when you grow up? Or do you have a couple different things you want
I
to
have
choose from?
a few different like ideas, but mainly I want to become a veterinarian.
Veterinarian.
Yes.
Okay.
And then other than that, like I also want to become an author and a movie producer.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, you can do more than one thing.
yeah.
You certainly can. And I've got a few friends that are veterinarians, so a lot of times they separate that into large animal and small animal. Large animal, of course, being horses, livestock, cows, and then so if you became a vet, which direction would you go, you think?
I think I go more with the smaller animals.
Small animals.
Yeah.
Yep, you've got small animals around here.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, very cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for sitting down at the chair with me.
You're welcome.
Nice seeing you again. Probably
Yeah.
see you again this time next year.
Yeah.
Maybe going through for Thanksgiving again.
Perfect. That
All
sounds
right.
good.
Thank you, Franny.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you. All right. We're back for the second half. And once again, we're in Fort Wayne. This is Kerry Ghent, Chief Retired. Kerry
Retired, yes.
Ghent. And we've known each other for quite a while. And we did decide that we're going to partake just a little bit for this. Been a long day.
We haven't done a whole lot.
But anyway, on previous podcasts, I've explained a little bit because we talked to Chief Pat Tracy over east of Portland a ways, and he was what we called a weapon system team chief. And our career field was, since 2008 on, has been aircrew flight equipment. And we would take care of everything the pilots wear: helmets, masks, G-suits, pack survival kits. And after 2008, we combined with the parachute shop. So it was packing parachutes, taking care of all the rubber gear, anti-exposure suits, one-man life rafts, life preservers, all that. So it's called aircrew flight equipment. And at the National Guard Bureau, we only had 2 guys to try to manage 92 wings at the time. And that was all the types of aircraft: heavy, rescue, fighters, and I think the guard part of the B-2 bomber was added into that as well.
Yeah,
at
special
Whiteman.
tactics.
Special tactics squadrons. So just having 2 people, Chief Snyder it was in charge when we were getting into being weapon system team chiefs, and Bob Osier, who we had a previous podcast also, Great Falls, Montana. He was the functional area manager there, and Chief Snyder was the career field functional manager as the chief. And so they had 13 chief stripes that they were spreading out within the Guard to help those guys out. So I started as the F-16 team chief. So if the F-16 units in our career field were having some issues, they should ask me the questions and things first. And A-10s with Kerry, F-15s was Chief Tracy at the time. And and then there was one person above us, the Combat Air Force's team chief or director. We just call him the CAF. And there was also one for the MAF on the heavy side of the aircraft, the 135s, all
C5s.
the C5s, C-17s, all the heavy aircraft. So we were supposed to take the heat off, and if there's things that we couldn't handle, then we talked to the CAF director. And I ended up being that for 5 years before I left. And then we would talk all the time, conference calls. And then if we needed to contact the guys at the National Guard Bureau, then we would. They were so busy. That's so much to handle and to take care of. So that's our history. So we've had a lot of those people that have been interviewed. It's been a lot of fun. And what I've been doing is just trying to record people's stories, which is what a lot of podcasts are.
Yeah.
And if there's people that don't want to be on YouTube, we'll just give them a digital copy for their family. And so Kerry agreed to do the military portion of this as well. And so we usually started off by, say as much about your family, you're raising as you like. Don't have to go too deep. That's totally up to you. But how you got interested in the military, the Guard, how you got in, like how you chose the career field, and we'll just go from there.
Well, and I guess it all started back as a young man. My dad was a Air Force veteran and loved airplanes. He was a civilian pilot. And at a young age, I think I was coming out of the Cub Scouts. My best friend and I and his dad and my dad did the Weeblos, and our moms did up till that point, and we loved it. But about when Cub Scouts ended and a lot of people would go into the Boy Scouts, my dad found Civil Air Patrol, which I'd never heard of it. He told me about it, and it was they had a cadet program that they taught leadership and aerospace education, and our particular squadron was very much into ground rescue, ground search and rescue, combined with the aviation assets of other squadrons. We could go look for lost civilian pilots when they went missing or crashed in the rural areas, and we happened to live up in Minnesota at the time. So I did that my junior high and high school years, and I found the niche. I liked the structure of a paramilitary organization. I loved the uniforms. I loved the insignias. I loved just all the structure, the different jobs, and a lot of that just, I think now, just turned 51. So I think looking back, I probably would have been an alphabet kid. I would have been ADHD or whatever. They didn't have that. That wasn't real popular back in the 70s. But I was a handful as a child, and I found my anxieties were lower. Now I realize what it was. I find comfort and I can relax in structure, and I liked that about the military. So going through junior high and into high school, looking for what do I want to do when I grow up? At the time I kind of wavered between wanting to be a pilot, either a civilian pilot or a military pilot. Top Gun had just come out. Mm-hmm. That was sort of my, I think I was in junior high.
Now, you didn't know it in Top Gun, but Goose's last name was Bradshaw.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Didn't come out to the second movie.
Yeah.
Sad to say that.
And I think that if I were to have a regret, I didn't try for the Air Force Academy. Mm-hmm. That was one of the things. I just got spooked with the competitiveness, and I didn't try. And about that same era of my life, I really wanted to be a state trooper. That was, from about junior high. Again, grew up in Minnesota, so the state troopers up there had their colors were tan and maroon, and I loved that maroon Smokey Bear hat. Mm-hmm. And so that was sort of my goal. And going through, about the time I got to high school, I knew I wanted to go to college, and I knew college was expensive. Looking back now, I would say we were poor, but we never had a new car. We lived for most of my life in rented houses. And I knew my parents. I mean, we didn't have money for braces. We didn't have extra money for a lot of things. And I knew college was not going to be part of the picture. And I knew I wanted college. I loved learning. And the military was a way to pay for that. So about midway through high school, I knew I wanted to be in the military. And I joined initially the Army Reserves. And I don't know how. If you were to ask me why the Army Reserves, I think they were just the recruiting office. I knew where they were at. So I swung by there and I said, hey, I think I want to be in the Army. And the main purpose at the time was I just wanted a way to pay for college. And I went through the medical processing and scored well on my ASVAB, which is the test we all had to take to enlist. And I remember talking with I think they call them counselors or something at the end of MEPS that you sit down with and they help you pick a job. And he said, what do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I want to be a cop on the outside when I'm done with college. I said, so maybe a military policeman? And he goes, no, you don't want to do that. They just guard things.
Yeah.
And I was picturing Hawaii 5-0, and that was not what it was going to be, or chips. And I said, but I love airplanes. He goes, well, and again, I was up in Minneapolis. So they had a attack helicopter battalion over in St. Paul. He goes, you want to work on helicopters? I said, yeah, that'd be cool. So my initial enlistment, I was an attack helicopter crew chief on the AH-1F Cobra helicopter.
I don't know if I remember talking about this before.
Yeah, you might not. Well, you never asked.
Huh.
But I started off in aviation maintenance.
Right.
The Army is a whole different branch. They think differently. But aviation maintenance is aviation maintenance, and a helicopter is a very complex machine. And I loved the Army, and aviation in the Army is kind of like the Air Force is to the services. That the aviation's part of the Army is probably they get messed with least, but they're still Army, and they still think Army. But it was neat to work on helicopters. This would have been I joined in '89, August of '89 was when I enlisted. Pre Gulf War I. I was we were in basic training out in the field when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. I still remember we were out in the field, and the drill sergeants got us all together and told us that Saddam Hussein had just invaded Kuwait, and President Bush had ordered one of the airborne units to Saudi Arabia and said, we're at war. And that put a big seriousness back in, what was that, 90? Summer of 90, fall of 90? Because up till then, military is like, you can join the military, pay for college. We had, Grenada and Panama. But we'd been
a lot of Cold War stuff.
A lot of Cold War stuff, but, we had two decades since Vietnam. But my platoon sergeant was a Vietnam veteran. But when I was a crew chief, he was my platoon sergeant, and he was a crew chief in Vietnam and would tell stories. And now we're at war again. So that changed things, So then spent a couple of years working on Cobra helicopters. That was the predecessor to the Apache. Did that for a number of years. And then at some point moved to Indiana and transferred. What did I do? I went to an intel analyst, because the National Guard's a little bit different, even on the Army side, that it's the existing units around you. And unlike the Air Force, the Army, it's whatever type of units in the county you live in or the county next to you, and it's how far do you want to drive to drill.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody knew somebody who was the S3, which is like the operations officer of a battalion, and it happened to be a Stinger battalion, which is an anti-aircraft missile. And they needed an intel advisor, which you had to have the ASVAB scores, which I did. And I became an intel advisor with the S2 at the battalion level. And that was fun. Again, this is in the early 90s, between Gulf War I, where we weren't in any immediate danger of going to war. So intel was fun, had a top secret clearance, and got to do some fun stuff with that. And so now I'm in life where I'm married. I finished college. I applied for the Indiana State Police. So I was drill weekends. I was an intel advisor in Lafayette, Indiana. And then I was a state trooper, and I got assigned up in Angola, Indiana, which is at the northeast corner of Indiana. So it's where young unmarried troopers get sent to the toll road that goes across the top of Indiana. And either I was lucky or unlucky, depending on, I got sent to the toll road and spent my first 5 years as a state trooper up on the toll road. So about this time in life, I got married, married a girl I'd met up there in Angola. We had a child, and I was still driving down to Lafayette. When I took the job in Lafayette, I knew it was going to top out at an E5. In the Army, that would be a sergeant E5, which I was at the time, and I knew that. And they said, well, you won't be able to get promoted. And I'm like, that's okay. I like what I do. I'm not a specialist anymore, which I hated that sound of that rank. I liked the sound of sergeant. And about this time, the Stinger Battalion was being deactivated, and it was being turned into a military intelligence battalion, which I was the only military intelligence trained person other than the lieutenant. He was a military intelligence officer. And I was like, perfect. I'm going to get some of these slots and be able to get promoted. I'd gone to my NCO schools, and it didn't work out that way. I didn't play the politics. I didn't know the people because they were all Stinger gunners and they all knew each other. And the slots went to other people. Mm-hmm. And about this time, we had new young officers come up that were trying to make a name for themselves. And I was too old to be yelled at, for the color of my socks or for just the Army things that I just really was not patient for. So I was ready to get out. Up until this point, the Army had served me well. I'd gotten my 4-year degree. They'd paid for all of it. Mm-hmm. And I'd always told myself and my wife at the time that if the military ever stops me in fun, I'll just get out. At that point, I had no ambitions of retiring. I had no ambitions of being full-time military. I enjoyed the Guard. Drill weekends were fun. You got to be with a group of guys that you only see once a month. You get to get dressed up in your uniform. In the Army, we got to go shoot guns and go down to Camp Atterbury. I enjoyed it. But when it was, driving 2.5, 3 hours one way, the Army National Guard did not put you in hotels. So you slept on the drill floor, or I slept in my office with a tent or a cot and a sleeping bag. And then get home late Sunday night, sometimes having to go to work as a state trooper for third shift. It was dragging on me. And then this new captain wanted to yell at everybody. So I was ready to be done. Mm-hmm. And we happened to be going through the mall here in Fort Wayne, and I bumped into an Air Force recruiter. And the Air Force recruiter had a shop there in the mall and said, hey, you should join the Air National Guard. And I said, well, I can't.
So it was a Guard recruiter.
Yeah, it was an Air National Guard recruiter. Mm-hmm. It was Sergeant Snodderly. Oh, I can't remember his name. His son was Matt Snodderly. He was, and his son I served with as a chief at the base. But Sergeant Snodderly said, you ought to join the Guard. And I stopped. I was talking to him, and I said, well, I can't. He goes, why can't you? And I said, well, because I'm in the I'm in the Army Guard. And he goes, well, why can't you come? He goes, because I'm not allowed. I'm in the Army. He goes, who told you that? I said, the Army did. He goes, no, that's not true. I said, really? He goes, oh, yeah. As long as your commander signs off on it, we'll just transfer you over, and everything transfers. And I was like, I got a new glimmer because Fort Wayne was only 45 minutes from where I lived. And I liked that idea. And so I went back and talked to the Army, and they were accepting of it. And they said, okay, yeah, we'll release you, and you can transfer to the Air National Guard, that all went really smooth. But again, this was now late 99, early 2000 is when I transferred to the Air Force. And this was pre-merger. So this was when it was life support. I honestly looked at the list of available jobs, and I looked for the shortest tech school. Mm-hmm.
That was pretty common.
I was a young state trooper. By this point, I was about 5 or 6 years into my career as a state trooper. I had a young wife, a young child, just had the boy, David, at the time. And I didn't want to be gone. I still loved intel, but the Air National Guard was not going to honor my Army training, so I was going to have to go off to intel training for up to a year.
Yeah, that's a long one.
And I just wasn't willing to do that. I liked the military, and I wanted to stay in uniform, but I just really wasn't ready to make that kind of sacrifice away from my family. So I looked for the shortest tech school, and the shortest tech school available at the time, they had medical admin. It was an E6 position, a 6-week tech school. And I said, that's it. I'm good with that. So I enlisted, and I was out at the base in processing, and I got wasn't text messages back then. I think somebody found me on base and said, hey, are you? I said, yeah. They said, would you like to do life support? I'm like EKGs and blood pressure?
Yeah, it sounds medical to a lot of people.
Who's on life support? They said, oh, no. You take care of all the pilot stuff. I'm like, ooh, pilots. We had F-16s at the time. I'm like, ooh, that'd be cool. Mm-hmm. So right then it changed. I switched over to a life support job, and it also had a short tech school. At the time, it, I think, was 7 weeks. So I'm like, okay, I can buy off on 7 weeks. And so I joined the life support shop with 2 other guys about the same time. We both came in, prior Army, and they were Fort Wayne City officers. So we were 3 law enforcement guys, and we were all traditional guardsmen in E5 positions. And 2 of us were down at tech school on 9/11. You know, so we were, I think, and I was in block 3 or week 3 of tech school when the towers came down, and life changed. You know, life was, maybe it'll get back to normal now, but we've been at war. My son, I think, was 6 months old when the towers came down. And it just hit me the other day that his whole life we've been at war. So still state trooper, still life support, traditional. Again, love drill weekends. Drill weekends were fun. We'd go on TDYs. Anytime the Jets went somewhere, we would go somewhere. I got to go to Florida, and it was fun. You know, you had the opportunities to hang out with guys and do fun stuff, and no responsibilities. And so now we're coming through, and we go through the merger. So now the survival equipment shop and the life support shop merged to be aircrew flight equipment. And we've gone our couple deployments. So we've gone to Al-Udeid right after the war. Oh, so now after the Twin Towers came down, what was that, in 01? I think 03 was our first deployment to Al-Udeid. And that was back when Al-Udeid was still kind of a real deployment. Still tent cities and still pretty.
And that's in Qatar.
Yep, in Qatar. Took the F-16s there. Rainbowed with a couple units. Crossed paths with a guy named Gioconda. I was a traditional. He was, you know, and traditionals really were not treated. I mean, we just cleaned helmets and drove pilots to the airplanes.
Yeah, traditionals are the part-time guard folks.
Yeah, so but we liked it. We did Al-Udeid. And I think we did an Iraq deployment. We went to Balad, Iraq with the F-16s in 05 or 6.
Yeah, my first one was 06.
So we were there. And again, we in the Guard, they called it rainbowing. You know, that was us, and back then it was 2 other Guard units, and we rainbowed. Fort Wayne always rainbowed with Atlantic City and Vermont. So we...
And the rainbowing means we would cover like let's call it a 120-day period.
Yeah.
And we would coordinate, and we would put together a package of equipment, and some equipment from each unit, some airplanes from each unit, and then the people would fly in and out using that entire mobility package, 30 days for this group approximately, and then another 30, another 30. They varied in size, but that's, for simple math, that's the basic package.
Yeah, so the Air Force paid to bring the equipment in, the planes and hardware once.
Yep.
And then they would shuffle people out. And again, I did 2 deployments as a traditional, and it always worked out. And came back from that, and again, no responsibility. I didn't know anything. I knew just enough to be helpful. And on deployments, that wasn't much. And then, so now we're getting into the 2006-07, and the Jimbo, I heard of, we had lost the full-time guys. There was always a lot of drama and conflict on the full-time side. And as traditionals, we knew it because you'd come in on drill weekend, and it was just weird. People would file complaints against one another, and there's all kinds of bad blood. And we didn't know, none of us traditionals knew enough to get involved in any of it. We just knew so-and-so didn't like so-and-so. And so people were getting quit. People were quitting and getting fired. And then they went on the second deployment to Iraq. We always, in Fort Wayne, is Balad 2. And for us in Fort Wayne, especially in now the AFE shop, it was who got to go. It was never who had to go.
Right.
I never went on a deployment that it wasn't who got to go. It was more, at least for us in operations, it was the privilege of who got to go, and especially for the traditionals, you really need to be squared away enough to get to go on deployment. And so the second round, if you got to go to Balad 1, you were second tier. And anybody who didn't get to go to Balad 1, they had first dibs on Balad 2. And by now I'd had my second child, and I was divorced. So that marriage didn't last. And so I had 2 young children that I was taking care of, still a state trooper. And so it was easy to take a pass on that deployment. And that was about the time, and I think it was the fall of 2007, that one of the full-time guys said, hey, we're going to be gone. We need somebody to go to a compliance class. I'm like, what's compliance? And they said, oh, don't worry about it. Just go. I'm like, all right. It was a TDY. It was a week out in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And I remember it was fall because they said you could bring your shotgun.
Sure.
I was
Pheasant
like,
hunting.
what is this Air Force I've gotten myself into?
Pheasant hunting in South Dakota.
South Dakota. I'd never been. I think I'd been to Sioux Falls when I lived over in Minnesota, but I didn't know anybody. I knew nothing of nothing. And I go out there, and it was a Jimbo Bradshaw hosted it, and it was the first effect.
Yeah. What it was basically, it was not an Air Force class. It's something, just an idea that I had being the F-16 team chief and just wanting to get people together of any rank to come together and just very openly discuss our failures, our successes, but how to comply. So we'd had 2 different kinds of inspections from the Air Force. One was basically compliance, where they would come to your unit, make sure you're following all the regs, all the, dot the I's, cross the T's. Mm-hmm. And then we also had the go to war type inspection, operational readiness inspection. So that meant take everything that you needed at home to operate. The only reason we have that is so that we could go overseas and operate. Mm-hmm. So you have to take all your stuff, pack it up. There's rules for all that on how to do it. Mm-hmm. And we had different sections of the shop, like a minimum 5-6 sections. And so we were learning how to package all that stuff up. And I had a pretty good mobility package mm-hmm. built. So the first 3 days was compliance within your shop. And then after that, we went through the mobility package, how to build it. We had ours built. And so on the last day, I just assigned people to different sections, and our mobility package took it all over to the dining facility. I said, okay, open it up and put it together. And within about 15 minutes, we had an operable aircrew flight equipment mm-hmm. shop, life support at the time. And it was just a great way to get people together. And we never had a name for it. It was the AFECC, Aircrew Flight Equipment's Compliance Class. But we didn't give it that name for a while because the guy from Tucson called me, and I'm sorry I'm missing your name right now, Miller, Chief Miller.
Yeah.
And he originally went to school with my cousin in Minnesota, we found out later. But he calls me up. He says, I'm trying to build my financial plan, my fin plan. And he says, Jimbo, I can't call this the South Dakota class, because that's really all we called it. And we come up with the name, the AFEC, AFECC, Aircrew Flight Equipment Compliance Class. So that was the first of maybe 6, I think, overall that we did through the years. But that's where I met you.
Yeah, that was our first.
And you were pretty intense.
Yeah, I'm unraveling a little bit, but I'm wrapped pretty tight.
Said he likes learning.
And I just had, probably 3 or 4 pages, every other line on a legal pad of, what's a 1522 ? Mm-hmm. I'm learning all these things. And as a traditional, I had no clue.
Right. And
even going through my professional training, I'd call to the shop and like, what's a 1574 tag? Do we have those? And most of the answer was, no, that's required, but we don't do that. And then I go to this class with all these people. I didn't know any of them. They were mm-hmm. super friendly, but I I'm kind of an introvert, and I kind
As
of,
a traditional.
as a traditional, I just kind of, I don't know anything about that. I just come and clean helmets. But I had pages and pages of things to ask the full-timers when we came back. Are we doing this? Are we doing this? And again, we had one of these, what was it, a CUI? We didn't have it wasn't operational. We were just having a compliance inspection. UCI.
Yeah.
That was called back then.
Unit compliance inspection.
So we knew they were going to come out and inspect us. The unit had just gone through multiple of this drama, quittings and firings, and the shop was being run by two less knowledgeable people than me as a traditional. And about this time, they're posting, or they're going to hire the supervisor of the AFE shop, the merged AFE shop. And I think this is in the spring of 2008. And I'm looking at my life. Now I'm about 11 years into a state police career. I love my job. I had to go to day shift because I had two small children that were preschool age. And trying to get childcare and work third shift as a state trooper just was really challenging. And I made the decision to go to day shift. I had the seniority at the time. I could bid and get day shift, work in a county, and it was unbelievably boring. Mm-hmm. If you want to be a police officer, a state trooper, and you like doing that, day shift it's horrible. It's so boring that you just long for coffee break, you long for lunch, and then you long till your day's over. And then it was busy with two kids. So your schedule floated. There was no weekends off like a normal job. You got actual weekends off every 8 weeks. So drill weekend was always an issue. Childcare was always an issue. And now the job out at the base opened up. And again, I didn't understand dual status technician. I didn't understand AGR. I just understood federal job. At the time we worked Tuesday through Friday, had every other Monday off, holidays and weekends off, still get paid for drill weekend. And at the time it was making a little bit more than I was making as a trooper, but had the benefits weren't quite as good. The healthcare and stuff wasn't quite as good as I had as a state trooper, but I didn't have to wear a bulletproof vest. I didn't have to carry a gun. No one was trying to hurt me, and I could be home for my kids because now they're in grade school. And it was a pretty easy decision. I loved being a state trooper, but it wasn't who I was. I remembered as a trooper, you would go to gatherings because all your friends were troopers, or law enforcement. That was your social. And I always remember the old guys. It's like, you don't want to be, now I am the old guy, but they're still wanting to hang around with like the active. And it's like, go be retired or go, but they couldn't hang up. They couldn't hang up their gun belt and their badge because who they were was built around what they did. And I remember as a young man, I was not a perfect father. I've never been a perfect Christian. I've never been a perfect husband, but I always strive to say that's who I am. I'm a Christian first. I'm a father. I'm a husband. And
that's the way Chris Durkel's pup in I believe the second podcast, when he retired, he said he was okay walking away from it because he said, it's what I did.
Yeah.
It wasn't who I was.
And I still loved what I did. I loved being a state trooper.
You can. Yeah.
I loved putting on the uniform. I really did. But it was easy to say, yep, I'll trade that so I could be the kind of father I wanted to be. And so I took the full-time job. I still had these 4 pages of notes, but now I had, for the first time, a guy, Jim Bradshaw, I could call. And I called a lot because tell me about this. And he would tell me what to read. And I'd be like, all right. Mm-hmm. And I'd set off and I was reading. I was a brand new supervisor and I supervised 4 other people this was at the merger. So 2 survival equipment guys and 2 life support guys who didn't like each other, whose the philosophy was they were the only ones who could do their job and you could never learn my job, was the mindset. And partly my personality was, I don't care. You're going to teach him, and you're going to teach him, And then you're going to certify him and you're going to certify them. And everybody's going to learn everybody's job. And
Which is what we were supposed to do.
which we were supposed to do, but
It was difficult.
it was a challenge. And
A lot of responsibility in that job.
we had a lot of conflict, but it was, and I will, and I've told people this, and I mentioned it at my retirement, was Jim Bradshaw was the one, you specifically, and then the other networking that was a result of that very first AFECT was the reason why I was successful.
Well, and what it was we had these classes. I mean, we did 50 minutes and 10 minutes breaks, 15
Yeah.
minutes, 10 minutes break. We'd go all day. And we didn't mind because it was a bunch of friends and we were bringing new friends into the fold. But we would take a break and I'd have to run into my office and do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, get back after that 10 minutes. But you had the questions and you were very intense. I'm talking your eyes. You're just like at me. But when you told me you were traditional and you were asking the questions that you were asking, I was like, yeah, it's not going to take long, and this guy's going to get a hold of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you were asking all the right questions, and yeah, and then the friendship just went from there.
And I loved it. I loved aircrew flight equipment. That there were a lot of very specific, and then there was a lot of gray, and there was a lot of room to just make up. You had to make up your own ideas, and then
Because you had conflicting guidance.
you had conflicting guidance or no guidance.
Right.
And I worked with people, and there were other superintendents that wanted the rules to tell you exactly how to tie your shoes. And we had technical guidance that was very exact.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to running an AFE shop, it just wasn't that way. It told you to document something, but it didn't give you a form. And some people became paralyzed when the Air Force didn't tell them exactly how to do something. And they were terrified to do anything out of fear that someone was going to cut them off at the knees, especially our maintenance brothers that merged with us. They were terrified of QA, and if you're wrong, it means you're a horrible person. And that just, in Fort Wayne, that's just not how we did things. And my personality was, we're going to lean forward. And if there's not a rule we're breaking specifically, we might bend it, we might tread on it a little bit.
And what he's talking about is exactly why I talked with Chief Snyder to start the AFEC class. Because in that, while we're sitting there, the guy's sitting over here and some over here, and he would be explaining how he does things. And somebody over here would say, I haven't been doing it that way, but that sounds like a great idea. And somebody else would be talking about another subject, and somebody would say, well, I hate to tell you this, but based on this, this, and this, that's a wrong way to do it. But people wouldn't take offense. Everybody was learning from everybody, and we wanted the Air Force inspectors to come in and see a very similar program, say, in each fighter shop that they went to, because this is fighter shop based.
And not reinvent
the wheel.
And some of it is, I know that it's just the way I am. I wanted to be right. I wanted to know exactly what the rule was, think through the best process, and then come to South Dakota and it was sort of like showcasing it or getting to go, in the academic world, it's publishing a paper and having peer reviewed.
Mm-hmm. They called it a best practice in the inspection world.
And in South Dakota, and even as a young superintendent, I started having programs I could showcase. I could come and say, hey, I really thought through QA, and here's my ideas. And I'm an outside the box thinker or creative thinker, and I never stayed on path. And I did enjoy learning and growing and asking questions.
You know who benefited the most? Our shop, because there's a lot of the young folks. We had a lot of things that we were pretty dang good at, but everybody in our shop had the luxury of attending that.
That's right.
And everybody in the shop was hearing it all. And as soon as everybody cleared out the next week, we're like, oh, we're going to change this. We're going to start doing this way.
And there were, and we could probably get a map and pick the shops who did that. Mm-hmm. Fort Wayne did. Anytime I came back and I'm like, how are we doing this? And they'd explain it to me. I'm like, okay, now show me the regulation. okay, we're wrong. We're changing. And it didn't matter. Well, I don't care. I can read English, and I never did learn how to pack the parachute, but I could read.
Didn't either.
I never got certified on any of the survival equipment things because during that training, I was learning the QA program or the CTK program or the TMDA program.
Yeah. At the time, I was already a team chief, and after all your learning, you became a team chief.
Yeah.
So we're answering phone calls weekly, daily. So there really was, I'm sure we were looked down on occasion by certain people, but there was no possible way for us to do that entire job and do what we were responsible for, besides supervising the shop, working the team chief issues.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, but I loved it.
It was great.
I really enjoyed getting my shop in order. We did good on that first inspection, but we had Jimbo come out. I remember Chief Snyder. Will Wright. Senior Master Sergeant Wright, Baltimore came out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we got chewed up pretty good, but we took all those lessons. And again, if we were wrong, we threw that out and redid it. And that would be another area that I think why Fort Wayne was successful is we didn't hold to any, well, this is the way we've always done it. It was, well, what does the regulation say?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only thing I'm beholden to. And we were successful in Fort Wayne. We had the 4 full-time folks were all passionate. Sometimes that was the conflict because they were so passionate and they weren't nearly as willing to let go of the way they did things in maintenance or the way they did things at their other base. But in our traditionals, we didn't being a traditional. I remembered back when I worked on helicopters and the full-time, because they also had technicians and AGRs on the helicopters, and they never left anything for us to do because they didn't trust us. Mm-hmm. They didn't trust us because we weren't very good. We weren't very good because we never had anything to do, and it was a self-fulfilling cycle. And I always felt if we had to go to war, could I pull an engine? Could I replace a transmission? Because they never taught us. And I said, I'm not running. We rely on our DSGs, and we were, I think, one of the first shops that everybody in the AFE shop, with the exception of myself, was a fully qualified 5 or 7 level.
Mm-hmm.
They packed the parachute. They built a mask. They could teach aircrew flight equipment training. Everybody went to survival school. Everybody went to water survival school. And we were pretty gung-ho. I mean, we really didn't take anything. And I think I tried. I remember setting aside time. I was trying to learn. Did we? Yeah, we didn't inspect the life raft and life support.
No, we would drop anything rubber was all survival.
Yeah, so we would get it back, and then we had to fold it, right? Yep. We folded it.
Reinspect little pieces of it and then refold it.
And I started down, having one of them teach me. And like I said, it just wasn't possible because the phone was ringing, the emails were piling up. And I don't have a lot of regret there. I know Giaconda, he was a working superintendent. I was not.
Jason Giaconda, Atlantic City.
Yeah.
I want to drive your way sometime in a year or so here. You and Muggs.
And so I went from, I think I got E6 as a traditional, and then I got hired full time, and I went from E6 to E7 to E8. And then, Chief Schneider was out at Readiness Center. You were the CAF. We had just transitioned to A10s, and I was asked to be the team chief, which was never an ambition of mine. I remember I wanted a seat at the big table. I wanted to be as smart. I remember someone saying about Jeff Schneider, Chief Schneider, he's got the PhD. He was the smartest guy in the room. And I like Jeff. I got along with him. I wanted to be smarter. I wanted to learn and be as smart as any of our active duty counterparts. And we started during the Chief Schneider and especially Chief Mugley years. We got to know them a lot better, and we interfaced with the active duty AFE chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked being as smart as they were. When it came to our programs, was never as good at EPRs and all the active duty games they played.
But there was regulations to read for yourself
Yeah.
in order to educate yourself.
And they were available, especially once the World Wide Web came out and e-publishing, and you didn't have to sign up to get a paper copy of an AFI. You could just download it. And I'd get my own copy and I'd read it, and then I'd get on the phone with Jimbo or Gioconda, Pat Tracy sometimes. And we'd have good, passionate debates. And I remember old Jimbo up there on the stage sometimes, okay, everybody calm
He always
down.
called me the peacekeeper.
And it's like, no, I'm right, he's wrong, and right here. And iron sharpens iron, and I don't think, a few people got feelings hurt, but most of them.
That's because we're passionate about
Yeah.
about what we do. So we never took offense to that. We just made sure the fire didn't flame itself.
And it usually, I don't think there's any hard feelings.
No, no.
And it felt good. It felt good to further the career field, going on inspections of other units. I remember that. I remember, what did you and I do? Our first one was that New Orleans.
A salve together?
Yeah,
Madison.
Madison.
AJ.
Yep. And because we ate at that German restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
You brought me along as an assistant, and then I started doing inspections on my own and got to know Muggley. And those are friendships that, because we had AFE in common, that was our commonality. But personally, we're all pretty different.
Mm-hmm.
We come from different walks of life. But that commonality, it created a brotherhood that I know I stay a little bit involved with the guy who took my job in Fort Wayne, and they don't have it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that was unique to our generation of superintendents.
Yeah, we had a very close-knit group, not just the team chiefs and the CAF. And on the MAF side, they were pretty tight too. But yeah, and anytime you retire, you wonder how things would go. And we're all replaceable. You put your finger in a piece of water, pull it out, or a glass of water.
Yeah,
there's somebody just as good and hopefully better than you to go in there. And Zach's pretty dang good.
He is, and I felt good. I remember there's a little bit of competitiveness, and there's, I think, the darker side of my personality wanted to see the AFC shop felt flatter. Was it falter? No, what's the word I'm thinking of? Falter after I left. And I realized that's not healthy.
Yeah, definitely not.
And
you have those thoughts, but it's fleeting.
It's supposed to be fleeting.
You chastise yourself, after that, and you're like, what the heck?
And it didn't. I was intentional about grooming Sergeant Spieth. Him and I were friends.
Well, he worked for I can't remember the term, but the headquarters Air Force, the top guy in the career field at the Pentagon, active duty wise, and he worked for him for a year.
Yeah, it's not just short of a year.
I think it was about a year. So then
Zach to be a PCS.
Spieth came back here and with all that knowledge,
and he's been very successful. I was intentional. I knew I wasn't going to work there forever, and I felt good. Battling that other side of my personality is like, no, he did run a successful. He was developed.
And admitting that darker side of you on what you're talking about there, it's cool that you can say that out loud, but they also know that you're telling the truth about how proud of Zach you were.
We had a
still
great
there.
AFE shop. He's still running it. We had.
And next time around here, because we're going to be coming back through the years, even though my daughter won't live in New York anymore. Zach, we're gonna get a hold of you because you need to talk about your story as well.
And the AFE shop did a lot of things that they're still doing, bringing in young people, teaching the traditionals that you're not going to come on drill weekends. I remember as a traditional on Saturday, they'd have stuff for us to do. The full-timers would have things for us to do. But literally on Sunday, we would fight over the Sunday paper, back when they printed newspapers. We'd fight over the ads in the sports section. Then we'd go to lunch and we'd come back and we'd watch football all afternoon.
Oh, wow.
And then we'd leave. And that That happened.
Because you got all your assigned stuff done on Saturday.
Yep. And nobody pushed us outside of our comfort zone. Nobody expected anything of us beyond what we did. The survival, we weren't merged. They didn't push the issue on drill weekends or full time. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't want that. And I remember our traditionals who were around for both eras were saying that, I can't believe how busy we are, but they loved it.
Mm-hmm. They wanted to be busy.
They wanted to be busy. They wanted.
We want to be busy.
We packed parachutes. We broke norms of traditionals packing
Mm-hmm.
parachutes in a drill weekend.
I've got a Madison story. I don't remember if you were there. AJ and I don't remember if you were there or not. And, excuse me, we went out to eat, and we were ordering our drinks first. And AJ ordered some liquor, something in Coke. The other person was something in Coke. And I was like, Crown. I assumed Crown and Coke. And it was this guy's first night being a waiter. And he walks away and is just gone. Doesn't come back, looking for drinks. Finally comes back with 2 drinks, sets that down, sets the other one down. He looks at me, he says, sir, I can't, because it was a tall. And he says, sir, I can't pour you a Crown this deep. I said, no, with some Coke.
With
please.
a little Coke, yeah.
That was just a little side note on that Madison trip.
And that was another thing I liked about AFE is the travel. You know, that we got to go all around the country and seeing other units. I loved seeing how they did things. It was satisfying having the experience and had thought through all the AFE programs to share that and then see other ways to do things. You know, got to go to DC. Sharon Mason, who's the career field functional now. I remember her coming up, the different conferences.
Yeah, because some were just guard conferences. Some of them were worldwide, active duty and guard. Each one had their positives.
Yeah. And it was good. I really enjoyed operations, all the different TDYs. We had our long deployment. We did a 6-month when they started giving guard units a full 6-month rotation. So we did partly in Iraq, and then that's when ISIS started flaring up down in Iraq and Syria, and they moved us down to Kuwait, and the A-10s just bombed the hell out of them.
Now, weren't you sent somewhere where you actually had to physically build your own shop?
Yeah, that was
true.
That was the Kuwait when they were shutting down the A-10s in Afghanistan. So what year was that? 14? Yeah, the war was solved. They didn't need A-10s anymore in Afghanistan. So they sent us to Afghanistan to close down Afghanistan. And I think before we left the States, they knew we were going down to Kuwait. But they wanted the A-10s to cover the Army as they were pulling back from the FOBs. And our advanced people down to Kuwait, there was nothing. Mm-hmm. There were no fighters there. There was no AFE shop. There was no maintenance facilities. They had a cold base at Al Jaber that had like a chow hall. And they gave us, I think operations had 6, what do they call those, California tents? Alaska, there was a state's name tent, just a half. With an AFE had one for our equipment and one for our inspections. And it was a crash course in AFE development. And I went along I was the NCOIC, but I ran the AFE shop, and we stole everything we could from Bagram because we knew there was nothing. Every workbench we had to build, the lockers we loaded onto what was the pallets? I can't think of what a pallet was called, a PCU or a
ISU. The ISU Cadillac bins.
Yeah, no, we had to use pallets. We had the aircraft 563L.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what they were?
563L, I think you're right. Yeah.
They
were not quite squared. One
Right.
side was just a little bit longer than another, but you had to plastic bag it and net it all.
And everything had to be right. And we were robbing that wing up in Bagram, and there was enough of a bureaucracy at that active duty deployed wing that we would just play dumb and just keep stealing stuff. And they had these really nice, almost NFL-like lockers.
Still military to military.
Yeah,
Still the
we weren't
US.
taking it home.
One team, one fight.
But they certainly didn't see that. When I think the active duty chief, which would have been in the OSS, came by and he said, "You're not taking the lockers." And we're like, "Oh, okay, yeah." And he left. We're still unbolting them.
Yeah, the operational support squadron.
Yeah, that's where the chief was, the AFE chief.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not want us to take the lockers because there was other fighter squadrons at Bagram. But I went to RO6 and said, "We're taking everything, right, to set up." And he go, "Oh, yeah. And then, so different people would come by and like, "What are you doing?" We're like, "Oh, I was told," and just playing enough dumb. And I take that back. The AFE guy was a senior. Because I bumped into him out at Andrews. No, at Dayton. We had a conference at Dayton. I bumped into him again. Corp?
Yeah, I wasn't able to go to that conference.
It's the one where we all got sick at. That's when the carbon monoxide poisoning
That's right.
about killed that Alaska girl.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that.
But I bumped into this senior, and we took every workbench, every TV, office chair, everything. We had, I think the AFE shop, I think we had 5 or 6 pallets of everything. And I was already down in Kuwait, and I just kept telling them, saying, "Take anything that's not going to get us court-martialed." And they did. They cleaned out the building. And so we had a pretty good setup in Kuwait, but it was doing a lot of Form 9s, creative thinking. But we were stretching concertina wire around Opstown, a lot of creative negotiations going into Kuwait City. They had an IKEA, buying things and being creative. And it was, I told Rebecca, for me, it was like the Super Bowl of our career, because we'd always talked about, what if you had to go to a bear base?
Well, Chief Snyder talked about it all the time to tag on to the AFEC classes and the mobility package itself, having carpenter tools.
Yeah. One of the things I mastered was the DRMO and getting things out of the reutilization program and
the free stuff.
And we had a whole Pelican case full of DeWalt rechargeable tools, which came in handy.
Yeah. Actually, I had one of those big Pelican cases and a smaller Pelican case, chock full of carpenter tools. Now, of course, they've made some changes since I've left. So actually, this Friday, the aircrew flight equipment guys in my shop, that podcast is being released.
Oh, okay.
And that day, they pulled one of the hand saws out of there, still with the blue foam sliced in the middle, covering the sharp stuff. And they all signed it and presented it to me because they knew
that's awesome.
All those carpenter tools were near and dear to my heart.
Yep. And when you need them, and we were going to the dump and salvaging doors to make tables out of. Intel didn't have anything either, mission planning. We were taking, because the base ripped out all of the bunk beds and had a contract, so the dump was full of these old bunk beds. So we were going there and cutting them up, putting them in pickup trucks. It was a long deployment. 6 months was my longest time being deployed. But I was a chief, so that life was a little easier, which I had to acknowledge was better than sleeping in a 20-man tent. But it was still long,
my longest was either right at 3 months or just a hair after. So you're like doubling what I had.
And it's, but I liked it. I really, it seemed the most expeditionary I'd experienced in the Air Force. And came back from that, and let's see, and then didn't go downhill, but there just wasn't as much learning. At that point in my career, I started interfacing more. At this time, Chief Mugley was out at Guard Bureau, which was a good, still is a good friend of mine. And he had the opportunity and allowed me to roll in and do things with the active duty chiefs. So I had the opportunity Because I was A10, I got to go out with the ACC, AFE chief and his staff out to Davis Monthan. And we inspected every AFE shop on base. So it was an A10 reserve unit, two A10 squadrons active duty, a special tactics, and a rescue AFE shop. And that gave me the perspective. And I think for guard AFE shops, there's generally two kinds: better than active duty or way worse than active duty. And I know Fort Wayne, Sioux Falls, Atlantic City, some of them ran really good shops, and we could hang with any active duty squadron out there. And that was nice. We got to sit in. I got a chance to participate with active duty, rewriting, the way we train people. Looking at tech school, we had a 1 week down at where we at Randolph Air Force Base with AETC, and we were looking at tech school.
Right. Gaining the relationship with the active duty chiefs, they were really good to us in the rewriting of the regulations.
Yeah, the 11-301.
Because, if anybody's going to complain about anything, it's going to be the regulations themselves. So there was different levels, and it took a long time. It was like a year or two, year and a half to 2 years from start to publish to the publishing date. And we would go through different revisions, and they were really taking our opinion to heart and really enjoyed that. That I would say as my favorite task, notwithstanding visiting other units and getting to know all the people doing staff assistance visits and regular inspections, was the being able to comb those regulations and try to help write them better, a little more guard friendly, because there's some things you can't make active duty and guard friendly, but where we could, they listened to us on a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, and
so
Chief Schneider, cool. I think, opened that door.
Oh, he did.
And
he did.
And that was probably the highlight of the AFE career, was getting an opportunity to have an impact on policy at the Air Force level.
Yep.
And that was nice. I have taken things away and learned from that are now paying dividends in my retired life with running the restaurant, running the nonprofit, because it's back to writing policy. We're writing a policy manual for the restaurant, writing policy for going to Uganda. And it's interesting when you interface with non-military. We're still professionals in their own right, in their own careers, but they've never done that. It seems unique in the military that, a chief master sergeant has so much more breadth of responsibility than just running a machine. A well-oiled, somebody hands you a section and you're the manager. An AFE shop was not. You had to invent stuff. You had to call. And I remember interfacing. After I left AFE, my last 5 years, I was in the IG section. So we were getting ready for another inspection base-wide, and they really needed someone. They didn't tell me to be a bull in a china cabinet, but I sensed they were wanting someone who didn't really worry too much about other people's feelings. And so I went to the IG, and again, what we had in AFE, I saw other people on base. Nobody did that. Nobody talked to their counterpart up in Michigan.
Right.
I would talk to the fire department, or I'd talk to logistics or maintenance. Maintenance was probably the only people who kind of did, but not at the level we did. We were master sergeants communicating with other master sergeants at other bases. How do you do? And nobody else on our base did that.
Right.
They were just a equipment management person in LRS, and they had no idea how their counterpart at Toledo or Battle Creek or Selfridge or Terre Haute. And it baffled me, and it takes me back to that affect. Why do we act like we're on an island?
Right.
When we're not? We're part of a giant organization, and we're one cog, identical to the same cog in another wing and another base.
Right.
And to this day, when I finally retired, and that was every section on our base was always trying to reinvent the wheel, whether it be service. And I said, why call your person up at Battle Creek? They serve chow every drill weekend. How do they do it?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that was something that, and
we had such a tight knit group with the team chiefs, but I felt like the people in units that we would visit and stuff, that they still felt a part of the group, you know, that we weren't some kind of elite group, but we were the leaders of the group. But just it was, you know, and I can only speak to the fire side.
right.
But man, it just seemed like we were all very tight. That when you talk about having somebody to call, it felt to me, and I really hoped that each superintendent and NCIC out there felt they had at least 3 or 4 or 5 people they could call. Mm-hmm. You know, whether it was team chiefs or just people that they were close to.
Yeah, there's some of it was our personalities, because I remember, you know, there were specific units that you would try to bring them in the fold. Call me. You know, I can't stay here. I got to head home next whatever. Call me. And they wouldn't. You know, they didn't embrace the camaraderie of the bigger, and they weren't in it, and it showed. Their programs showed that they insisted on being alone.
Yeah.
And we could probably rattle off the.
Yeah. And I hope that if people didn't feel comfortable calling us, that they would at least call other superintendents they were close to, you know, and like secondhand get
some of it was
information.
generational. You know, we were the chiefs, and there were the brand new superintendents.
Yeah.
But it was something I found I wouldn't think was all that unique, but it really turned out to be unique in what we did. And the sad part is, when I do stop by the AFE shop, or when I was still, before I retired, I'd just go over there. Now I was the stop work fairy. I show up and everybody stops working and listens, and they're still fighting the same battles, you know, the same.
Oh yeah. I hear it when I go back and visit too. I like to go back for the social stuff, but if you're there waiting for a pilot having his Finney flight, say his last flight for his career, but you're there when they take off, so you're hanging out waiting for them to land, and you start getting into conversations. I just start shaking my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're fighting the same battles.
Same.
And I'm like, you know, I'll talk for a little bit, but then I'll just shut up, or I'll go out in the hallway and say, you know what, this part I don't miss.
Yeah, to this day I still love the problem solving. You know, like, let's come up with a problem statement. What does success look like? Let's work there. And when they've gone full circle 3-4 times, and they're still trying to solve CTKs or QA, it's like some people, and this
Tester calibrations.
It's the Air Force.
Yeah.
Some of them, it's like an incorrigible child. They don't really want to change. There's whatever institutional is that they don't want to, but it was a good, and I'm glad I retired. It was the right time for me. And to be able to retire as a federal technician when I'm 51, I'm blessed. You know, I can still, you know, with retirements, I can look back. State police seems like a lifetime ago.
Right.
You know, when I see pictures, I was like, oh my gosh, I look like a baby. But it all made me, you know, in today's, and it's like I don't feel like I'm on the slow down path of life. There's so much I'm wanting to do. I still feel like I want to learn. I want to be the best restaurant owner. I want to be the best nonprofit. And wow, there's a lot to learn.
Well, you've always loved learning, so
and it's yeah. And the obstinate side of me, I was going to tell you this when we were down at the restaurant. I've always been, well, what's the rule say? And we were, when we first opened the restaurant, I was there a lot. And I'm still, now that I don't wear a uniform, I don't want to wear anything but, you know, gym shorts and flip-flops and a t-shirt, you know, cool breeze and righteous waves, man, as our Spicoli used to say. And I would catch flack from some of our management down at the market, all restaurant people, because I was wearing flip-flops. And they said, "Oh, I'm surprised your owners let you, or I'm surprised you're able to wear flip-flops. You're not supposed to wear open-toed shoes, you know." And I'm like, "Well, I am one of the owners, so nobody can tell me what to do. And that's not a rule." They go, "Oh, yeah, you can't." I'm like, "No, I called Board of Health. It's not a rule." They said, "Well, it's somewhere. You're not supposed to wear." I'm like, "No, that's not a rule. So you're wrong, and I'm not." And it's like, yeah. And it's the same thing of all these years, somebody has told people in a restaurant, you have to wear clothes.
We've always done it this way kind of thing.
And I'm like, and my wife told me the same thing. You can't. So I did. I looked up the rules. It's not a county rule. In Indiana, our Board of Health is a state level. Called them, sent emails. And I don't want an answer from them. Tell me where in the health code, because I can also read. And they're like, "Well, I'm like, "No, what is the rules? Which chapter and verse?" And I found it. I downloaded it and I've read it. There are a lot of them. And there are rules about wearing gloves and some of these other things.
Sure.
But open-toed shoes is not one of them. Mm-hmm. And to this day, not now because it's cold here, but a lot of those, like, the rules are written down. Mm-hmm. And if they're not, we need to write, if we want that rule, we need to write the policy and say, we want, shorts or pants, no holes. And a lot of that stuff we learned in the Air Force and AFE is paying dividends. Mm-hmm. Because there are health laws and you have to follow them.
Right.
But you don't have to follow rules that aren't rules. I wanted to get rid of a sink. Well, I couldn't. Once we looked into the rules, the definition of, we have to have the sink. So we had to come up with a different plan. Mm-hmm. But so many people just throw up their hands like, "Oh, we can't do it." Well, maybe not.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, you know what? We've been going for a while, covered a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff.
Do you have anything about your career you'd like to mention before we close this out?
No, I think the one thing I would pass on, to especially anybody young into management, on the, once you get in the Air Force, it's, your E7-ish, is tread lightly on other people. I didn't do that as a young supervisor. I was always eager to be the smartest and the rightest. And I didn't appreciate that you can be right without the other person being wrong. And I didn't tread lightly when I could have. I could have been more gracious. And I just loved the thrill of inventing and organizing and being the best. And I realized, not too late for a lot of people, but in some people I crossed paths with early on. To this day, my son now is in the Air Guard out at the base. And to this day, there are people I've never met who worked for people that I crossed, who still think negatively of me.
Sure.
And I remember telling my son, I'm like, "Tell him I apologize." I said, "I don't know who this is. And I don't know who told him that about me, but it's accurate. I was that way."
And you're able to admit that stuff.
Oh, yeah. And looking back, people are all that matter. Mm-hmm. Programs come and go. Yeah.
Well, I came over for your retirement, and you were apologetic at your retirement, and I thought that was very big of you.
People are all that matter. Your family.
You're learning that with the Uganda thing a whole bit.
People are all that matters. Don't put programs in front of people. Value the people, and just don't give up on people. People are messy.
Sure.
And that was that way. Management, there's all sorts of people, and they do dumb things. But
you bet.
But yeah, that's
I wish you luck in the future. Thank you very
absolutely.
much. Appreciate it. It's been great coming here. I don't, like I said, my daughter in New York is not going to be there 14 months from now, but I still plan on coming over. Okay. And I want to.
12 months from now, she'll still be there.
Yeah,
so we got next Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so it might be Thanksgiving one more time over there. and I want to talk to Zach Spieth.
Yeah.
Is that how you say it? Spieth?
Spieth. Yep.
Okay. I'm sorry, Zach. I always forget Spieth, and get him on here. I know he was interested in podcasts and stuff, and even stuff with his church, if I remember talking at your retirement. But we'll be coming here down to Terre Haute to see Pup, Chris Dirkles.
Yeah.
Shout out to you. And if you stayed this long, thank you very much for listening. These guys are doing a great thing down here, and we hope them the best. Wish for the best for them, but also if you would like to go on the Uganda trip, what was that website, the future website again?
ROHMM.org.
Okay. And this is going to come out about six weeks from now, so like beginning of January.
Yeah, we should have it. Should be live. I know there's a website there now, but you can, and you can email me at Kerry, Kerry, at ROHMM.org.
Nice.
So reach out to me.
You bet. Thanks a lot, Kerry.
Thanks, Jimbo.
Appreciate you guys. Take care.